Okay, alright, you saw the title, Scary Stories That Can't Be Explained. What I mean by that is they can't be explained as in like they break the normal explanation of reality. Whether it be a supernatural curse, impossible locations or entities, unexplained phenomenons, haunting, you know the deal. So yeah, I've got a great collection of stories for us today, so let's go ahead and get into it. The first story today is from r/no-sleep from user Guy Ox. I'm a nurse, and if my patient's pain level reaches 10, I'll die. For me, the hardest part of being a nurse has always been seeing my patients suffering from pain, especially when there's little I can do to ease it for them. It comes from what I consider to be my empathetic nature. That's why I wanted to become a nurse in the first place, so that I could shoulder some of their burdens and take that pain off their hands through my aid. I always knew that my patient's agony would hurt me, emotionally at least, but I never thought that it could literally kill me. And yet, that's what's happened to so many that I knew on that fateful shift. I had been working in a local hospital in my city, one with a fairly great reputation and resources. St. Mary's Hospital had been somewhere I'd wanted to work at when I was doing my placements, and I fit in so well there. As someone who thrives working under pressure and comforting people in hard situations, I was typically rostered in the hospital's ICU. You might think it would be overwhelming, but it never was for me. Not until the day I met Brandon. My long shift was just starting when a new patient was assigned to me. The patient's doctor, Dr. Harrison, led me to him while explaining his situation. It was all fairly standard, a young college student who had been unexpectedly struck by a car while crossing the road, with multiple broken bones throughout his entire body. He was still being checked for internal damage after several days' admission, but was otherwise healthy and expected to make a full recovery. I got on well with Dr. Harrison, so his calm explanation about the patient put me at ease. In fact, I felt relieved to be working with this patient, viewing him as a break from the usual insanity of sepsis and organ failures. Entering his hospital room, I saw that most of Brandon was in a full-body cast, although his head and torso were unbandaged. The poor guy had clearly caught the full brunt of the speeding car that had hit him. Thankfully, his notes told me that he was being sedated with codeine, so at least he wouldn't be in much pain. I glanced over his charts before approaching his bedside, patient IDing him and introducing myself. "Hi, Brandon. My name's Eileen, and I'm going to be your nurse for the next few days," I told him warmly. Brandon looked like your typical college-aged guy, with a mop of messy brown hair, a youthful face, and some facial scruff. He greeted me with a sincere smile, but his green eyes were filled with worry. I wanted to put him at ease. For the next several minutes, we made friendly conversation, with me asking about where he went to college and what he studied as I went about assessing his bandages. Then came time for me to assess his pain level. "Brandon, I want you to tell me how much pain you're in right now on a scale from 1 to 10, I told him. Gently, I pointed to a chart on the wall with 6 smiley faces on it, ranging from a wide smiling one to a blanked face one to a deeply frowning one. The colors ranged too. The happier faces were moss and green, the neutral faces yellow and orange, and the miserable faces red and crimson. I explained to him how each face corresponded to pain levels. 0 meant no pain, 1 and 2 meant mild pain, 3 and 4 meant moderate pain, 5 and 6 meant severe pain, 7 and 8 meant very severe pain, 9 meant excruciating pain, and 10 meant the worst pain possible. He hesitated and thought for a moment before answering. 5, he said, with a nod against his pillow. That made sense for his level of injuries, widespread but stable bone breaks, with codeine for pain relief. He seemed to be managing the pain fine, it seemed. However, what he said next took me completely off guard. "Look, Eileen, I don't want to be a burden," he said grimly, fixing my eyes with a serious stare. "But I have to warn you, no matter what, my pain level cannot reach 10 on that chart. If it does, it'll be fatal." I was taken aback by this comment. In the past, I had had some patients that were prone to dramatic statements, and others that were deeply frightened. I was used to this, but Brandon had seemed to be level-headed and at peace with his injuries. He'd casually talked to me about his economics course and how long he'd be away from it. He hadn't seemed like someone that was terrified of dying. "Oh, honey, don't worry, we're going to take good care of you," I reassured him with a smile. "Your injuries certainly aren't life-threatening to you." To this, he looked up at me solemnly, his face framed surrounded by his casted limbs. I'm not saying it'll be life-threatening to me. If my pain level gets to level 10, everyone around me is going to die. My face went blank. I furrowed my eyes quizzically at this statement. How much codeine was this kid on right now? I know it sounds crazy, but it's been that way ever since I was a baby. He pressed on despite my confusion. Whenever I was in intense pain, if I fell on the playground, skinned my knee riding a bike, or burned my mouth on hot food, it would happen. Someone random in a 30-foot radius to me would die. I continued listening, trying to note his facial expression. He didn't look like he was hallucinating. He looked like he was recalling devastating, real memories. Sometimes it would be a stranger. More often than not, it would be someone I knew. They were more likely to be around me. It always came in the form of heart attacks. The first time it happened, it was my cousin Casey at my house. There were other relatives, neighbors, schoolmates. The longer and stronger my pain was, the more people died. My pain would probably spike to 7 or 8 on those occasions, he murmured. Those few seconds were all it took to kill people. Tears started to well up in the corners of his eyes, despite composed demeanor. I spent my whole damn life trying to be as safe as possible. Got my flu shots, never played sports, rugged up in winter, barely left my room. I did everything I could and still got hit by a drunk driver and wound up in a full body cast. Brandon turned from his reverie back to face me. His tearful expression was pleading. You seem really nice. You're doing really important work to help people. I don't want my power. I don't want to hurt you. I decided that I'd let the poor, clearly delirious kid go on for long enough. I calmly assured him that everything would be okay and made a note to have him checked for head trauma from the accident. The day went on and I continued with my rounds, thinking little of the obviously imagined story he told me, until I came back to double-check his medical records and add my own notes to them. His file was unusually long. Apparently, his family had a high incidence of cardiac arrest throughout his life. A grandparent here, an aunt there, a sibling too. And there was his cousin Casey, the first person to exhibit his heart condition. Now my interest was piqued. His high school records were also on file, and they had the same occurrences. Classmates of his had died of heart attacks around him, and he'd been investigated for potentially instigating them through violence or pranks. Brandon's history really was peppered with strange deaths, as he said it was. Could he have been telling the truth? Again, I shook it off. While completing my rounds, I reminded myself that I had to remain logical and sound in order to do my job. I couldn't start believing in crazy superstitions and cursed powers of death. By the time I returned to Brandon, I could see that he was in a state of even more distress and agitation. I pointed to the chart and asked him again to relay what pain level he was in. It was now a 7. Severe pain. The codeine must have worn off, or it wasn't properly working anymore. That level's enough for people to start dying, he fretted. Oh God, after years it's going to happen again. I wanted to calm him down. I was going to. But before I could, I heard an alarm sound from across the hospital floor. One of the other patients in the ICU was coding at this very moment, and staff were needed right now. So I let Brandon know that I would be right back and darted out of his room to the scene of the upheaval. Just one door down from where Brandon was, a patient had just flatlined out of nowhere. I watched as doctors tried, in vain, to revive him, but Mr. Levante was gone. Discussing it with my fellow nurse Aria, as they called the time of death, I couldn't help but note the strangeness of it. The patient had been recovering from stomach surgery and was just in the hospital for post-operative care. There was no reason he should have died then, and of a heart attack too. Aria adjusted her blonde bangs and reminded me that this was the ICU and these things weren't unexpected. She had no idea about the absurd death-bringing tale I'd been told earlier. Then, just as suddenly as before, another patient died across the hallway. This time, it was someone who had been in the process of being discharged to another unit, after already recovering from their illness. I didn't need another coincidence to convince me this time. I raced back to Brandon's hospital room and began to administer to him the codeine that I'd picked up along the way. He gulped down the tablets as fast as he could, not even pausing for me to get him water. He hadn't been due for his next dose for 2 hours, but I didn't care. I'd eat any reprimands the nurse in charge gave me. All that mattered was that I alleviated Brandon's pain and stopped the deaths. It did the trick. Slowly, Brandon's demeanor relaxed as the pain relief washed over him. No further deaths followed in the passing minutes. I looked at Brandon with a look of shared, bleak understanding. His story finally rang true to me. The rest of my shift would have to be conducted with that in mind. The pain had been coming from Brandon's damaged limbs, so I made sure to be extremely careful whenever I tended to them, changing his bandages, doing wound care, and conducting neurovascular checks periodically over the following 12 hours. It was all done with the gentlest, most delicate level of care. Any pinches or rips of pain could send his pain levels soaring again, and I had 2 examples of what would happen if that occurred. I could be the next one. How would they even gotten him into the hospital without paramedics dying en masse? The answer quickly became clear. Brandon would have been knocked unconscious during the initial accident. By the time he came to, his pain had been stabilized and medicated. God knows if any bystanders passed away at the scene from heart attacks too. Against all odds, I reached the end of my shift without any incident. I'd been so preoccupied with Brandon and his codeine that I'd barely paid attention to any of my other patients. Taking care of Brandon was taking care of them. But I'd kept the hospital alive that day without a bloodbath. Or so I thought. I had just said goodnight to Brandon and was headed into the elevator when Dr. Harrison pulled me into a conversation. He wanted to discuss my care of Brandon. Or at least that's where I think he was going with the conversation. "So, Eileen, before you go," probed Dr. Harrison, "I was meaning to check with you about one of your patients. Is it true that—" Mid-sentence, he dropped to the ground in front of me, clutching his chest. I knelt down to assist him, shrieking for help, but a few seconds later, he was dead. Another heart attack. Responding to my cries, a hospital orderly began racing towards us to assist when he, too, dropped dead, gripping his chest. My exhausted mind whirled over the long 12-hour shift, organizing my thoughts into order. Then, realization. Brandon. Something's happened to Brandon. Single-mindedly, I leapt up from Dr. Harrison's still body and began racing to Brandon's hospital room. The chain reaction of deaths was happening faster now. On the way, I passed the concerned wife of a patient asking what had happened to the 2 dead men near the front desk. She went down before I could even shout a response her way. The heart attack killed her as fast as the others. I sprinted past the hospital visitor. Brandon's curse didn't discriminate. I burst through the door into Brandon's room and was met by the cataclysmic sight of him face down on the floor, his casted limbs immobile save for him writhing in pain and moaning into the floor. On the table across the room was a stray codeine pill. He had been reaching for the pain relief pill I had foolishly dropped in my haste. In the process, he'd fallen out of his bed and, dear Lord, potentially re-broken every broken bone in his body. With a voice of haunted terror, I began to ask him the dreaded question. "Brandon, what's your pain level?" I didn't even need to finish asking. I realized he had been moaning a word this entire time, again and again. 9, his voice gurgled. His pain was now very severe, the kind of pain that made speaking near impossible. Oh God, it's rising. It's rising to a 10. This shook me out of my panic stupor. If his pain level reached 10, everyone in a 30-meter radius, every soul on this hospital floor, would die. I had to act now. I rushed over to haul him back onto the bed, but quickly realized this would almost certainly cause his pain level to jump, which meant certain death for everyone. The same followed for trying to knock him out with force. Codeine was only a moderate opioid. He was going to need something stronger. He was going to need morphine. Determined, I set about grabbing the morphine drip and setting it up while the screams of hospital chaos echoed in the background. I had just got the bag onto the stand when Arya's head poked around the corner of the doorframe. "Eileen, my God, I need your help over here," Arya cried. "One of my patients just went into cardiac arrest and are you administering morphine to a patient on the floor?" Arya was adamant that I come to assist with the domino of flatlining patients and staff alike. She triaged the situation and insisted I leave the non-dying teenager. How was she to know that he was the reason for all the death, that my actions were trying to stop it? Ultimately, I didn't need to convince her. My friend kneeled over dead seconds later, too, right before my eyes. In fight or flight mode now, I worked the IV drip into moaning Brandon's arm. I located a vein in his wrist and inserted the needle, keenly aware that I could be the next one to go like my colleagues had. At last, though, the morphine finally started to flow. I held Brandon, grief-stricken, and felt his pain lessen and lessen. Alongside it, my panic lessened. Soon, Brandon had passed out into sweet unconsciousness, parting with his unbearable pain. The death toll from that deadly day came to 9 people in total. 4 staff, 3 patients, and 2 visitors. It was the same number as Brandon's maximum pain. St. Mary's Hospital explained the tragedy as a mass panic chain reaction, triggering a series of undiagnosed arrhythmias. Even though it didn't make sense, there was no better explanation. Way more would have died if not for my actions, but they'd never believe that. I still wonder if it was really luck that kept me alive, or if it was Brandon's fondness of me that protected me from this effect. Regardless, with the guilt I feel for not acting faster, my emotional pain level is at a 10. It's because of this that I've dedicated myself to staying on as Brandon's nurse for the duration of his recovery. My responsibility will remain to keep his pain levels out of the red via care and medication, ensuring there's no future deaths. It's a bumpy road ahead, however. He begins physiotherapy tomorrow. Yikes. I have a feeling that this person who wrote this probably works in healthcare, because they're saying he's going to begin therapy, meaning they're going to be getting him out of bed and moving him, and he's going to be very stiff with broken bones. It's going to be very painful. Yikes. Yeah, poor Brandon. No, not poor Brandon. Poor people around Brandon. I'm going to be reading you a scary Reddit story from one of my favorite authors, Saturdead. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. It's from r/NoSleep, and it's titled Last Dig of the Summer. Some years ago, I worked with a tunneling crew. A job like that draws all kinds of people. Sure, it boils down to one guy holding the figurative shovel, but another guy has to point where to dig, and yet another got to get the dirt out. On a larger scale, it can easily get out of hand without proper management. Our crew was working on expanding a subway tunnel. It wasn't anything we couldn't handle, but my life was a bit of a mess at the moment. My wife and I just had our first kid, and I was having trouble keeping up with the new lifestyle. My wife was a trooper, but no matter what I did, I always felt like I was doing something wrong. That baby must have been the most patient one ever, as I fumbled with the most basic chores. I'd tuck her in too tight or get the temperature on the formula wrong. It was just one mess after another, and that's after working a 10-hour shift. The only thing I got right was putting her to sleep. I'd tuck my hand behind her little head, shush her, and sing. She'd go out like a light. Bam, down for the count. That one thing sort of made up for all my other mistakes. I have to thank my mom for the tip someday. It's an old song. It goes a little something like, "Oh, I fuff, my little one." Like a bolt of lightning from a clear blue sky, the subway tunnel gig was canceled. We got to work, and there was a big sign telling us to go home. I called my manager, but didn't get an answer. I called the guy at the top, and the number was disconnected. I was standing there with a crew of 8 other guys looking at me. Someone kept asking me if we were getting paid or what to do about our gear. Some of it was still locked away in the tunnels. The hours passed, and we didn't know if we still had a job. When I finally got a hold of my shift manager, he didn't have a lot to say. "They're shutting us down. I'm sorry. Gotta start looking for a new job." Not the kind of thing you want to hear when you just had your first kid. The whole crew was looking at me for answers, and I didn't have anything comforting to say. Can't sing those guys to sleep. You could try. I told them the truth. We were out of a job, and no one seemed to know what the hell was going on. I kept calling management to demand some answers, but all the numbers were either disconnected or put me on infinite hold. It wasn't until I wormed my way into one of the numbers for my boss's boss that I got anywhere. Some corporate big shot who had his name on a lot of papers and not a speck of dirt on his shoes. I was about to give him a piece of my mind when he suddenly changed tone. "We're looking for a crew. There's another job in the area," he said. "Not tunneling, but should be within your skill set. And how do we know it won't be shut down like the last one?" You don't, but it's the best you got. It pays well, real well. I can bring all your guys in starting tomorrow. What do you say? I said the only thing I could. I said yes. It was tough to come home that day. I'd been surrounded by this ceaseless vitriol all afternoon. One of the guys had been crying in the porta potty. This was supposed to be a long-term gig, and now we were all on shaky ground. Whatever this job entailed, it didn't exactly calm us down, but at least we could keep our heads up a little longer. I don't think I did a single thing right that evening. I forgot to wash my hands when I picked up my baby girl, getting her wispy hair a little dirty. I changed her a diaper, but I couldn't get the thing to sit right, and I think I used too much powder. It was just one thing after another. It wasn't until I sat down to watch the news that I finally got to do the one thing I was good at, singing her to sleep. One verse, and she was out. My wife joined me on the couch, speaking in a hushed voice. She was just as worried as me about the job, but I could tell she was trying to stay positive. She asked all kinds of questions, like what we were doing and for how long, and with what people, and I didn't have an answer for any of it. Not unlike the talking heads of the TV, all I could say is that we had a time, a place, and a generous paycheck. Just be careful, she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. Our girl can't sleep without you. Doing tunnel work is rough for a number of reasons. In summer, you're melting away in the heat. In the autumn, you're knee-deep in rainwater. In winter, well, you don't do a lot of digging in the winter. Ground gets frozen, can mess up the equipment. Depends on the job site, I guess. We were nearing the end of the season. The last dig of the summer is the one you finish just before you go on a vacation, and my guys had been robbed of theirs. I knew of at least one guy who had cut his trip to Tallahassee. He wouldn't shut up about it. It was better than having no job at all, but the disappointment was immeasurable. We'd been promised stable work for years to come. Now we were fighting for scraps. The location turned out to be a construction site. Not a dig site, mind you. There's a difference. The place was roughly the size of a football field, lined with a chain-linked fence wrapped in yellow plastic. There were all kinds of construction tools lying around, seemingly abandoned. There was even a bulldozer. We waited for about an hour before someone showed up. There was this one guy with protective glasses and a hard hat, our supposed foreman. He seemed friendly enough, probably someone a bit further down the career ladder. He came up to us and clapped his hands to get our attention. "Everyone feeling okay?" he asked, throwing his arms out. There was a murmur, but no one was particularly enthusiastic about the whole thing. We weren't a construction crew. Then again, at that point, we had no idea what kind of crew we were supposed to be. "We're going to go through all the details in a bit," he continued. "I just want to say, I know this isn't ideal. We didn't have a choice in the matter. That said, if this works out, we're going to have a lot more work for you going forward. So let's get started, yeah?" That lifted our spirits a little. I saw a couple of nods and the hint of a smile. Maybe things would work out. We walked into the site. He showed us this spot at the far end, right next to a jackhammer. There was a hole about 3 feet deep, 6 feet across. It looked like they dug it out with shovels, by hand. In the middle of the hole, there was a rock formation, like a white spike poking out of the ground. It was roughly the length of my arm. "This is what we found," the foreman said. "This particular mineral is uncommon in this part of the country. It's mainly used in pharmaceuticals." "What's it called?" "Pylolith. It's used in something called Compound 5. Life-saving stuff." He went on to explain the process. Essentially, this construction site was found to be littered with pylolith minerals. The entire site needed to be dug out, carefully, and the minerals had to be extracted as a whole. 2 guys were on standby to measure, catalog, and mark down each extracted sample down to the milligram. The tools were oddly specific. For example, we couldn't use jackhammers. We had to slowly work the base of the mineral with a portable water jet cutter. We couldn't touch the minerals without wearing rubber gloves, and we had to put out sprinklers near every active dig spot to suppress mineral dust. That, and there was a gas mask mandate. "It's important that we don't breathe this stuff in," he explained. "You don't want that." By the end of our first day, we had dug up 5 of those spike things. They were all carefully placed in a vacuum container and sealed with silicone spray. All that work for what equates to a suitcase of rocks. At the end of our shift, one of the guys noticed something funny. Technically, we were right next door to our abandoned subway gig. Out through one door, in through another. It took some time to get used to the new setup. We had to work with a lot of protective gear, and we kept getting soaked by the water jet and sprinklers. Working in that kind of environment gives you all kinds of uncomfortable aches, especially when you need to have a gas mask. The mix of heat and water kept fogging up the glass, sucking the salt from my skin and stinging my eyes. It was exhausting. We usually managed to get somewhere around 6 to 10 piloliths a day, depending on the weather and how fast we could get to the base of the mineral. They were all roughly 3 feet down, but a few of them were a bit smaller, and some were a bit bigger. There was one of them that was so tall that it poked out of the ground, but had turned a metallic gray. We sent a picture of it to the foreman, and he said it was a no-go. "It's gone bad," he explained. "Cut it, leave it, don't matter." Every night when I came home, I could barely stand. I fell asleep in the shower once, waking only when the water turned cold. I'd remember to eat just because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It was a strange feeling, and my wife could tell I wasn't doing all right. I felt bad not being able to keep up with the housework, but hey, at least I could sing my baby to sleep. That I could do. Side note, guys, I don't know if you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking, but why does the OP keep bringing up that he can put his baby to sleep? I don't know. I have a feeling we're going to find out soon. The fact that the site was so close to our old tunnel job was really strange. It was literally a stone's throw away, but cities can get like that sometimes. It might take 20, 30 minutes in traffic to get from one street to another, but walking there at a brisk pace takes a couple minutes. I hadn't even thought about it until they pointed it out. The job was going to take weeks, maybe months at the pace we were going. We got the go-ahead to bring in some more guys, but it was hard to find people for a temp job at short notice. I managed to get a hold of 4 more in total, but trying to bring them up to speed was a hassle. I kept getting all these questions that I couldn't answer. For example, why couldn't we just dig up the whole site and then filter out the pylolith later? We could have it all done in about a week tops. And yeah, they were right, but we weren't allowed to do that. And what the hell is a pylolith anyway? After a full week of working with the stuff, we were getting into a sort of rhythm. We split up between surface testing, excavation, cutting, and transport. I was one of the cutters. I stood in a dirt pit with brown water up to my knees, trying not to get my fingers blown off as the drainage pump flopped around. Now, I'm good at what I do, but we were working without proper routine and oversight. It was the Wild West. First accident happened 8 days into the job. One of the guys, can't remember his name, got his face dust sprayed with pylolith. The sprinkler stopped working and he had to change his filter after a cut. All we saw was how he stepped away, took off the mask, and had a seizure. Dang, must be some pretty strong stuff. They had to carry him away and wash the dust off with a hose. He got back to work after a couple days, but I don't think he was ever the same. There was something off about him. Not quite a 1,000-yard stare, but he would tilt his head up at strange angles every now and then, like he was looking at something beyond the clouds. That, and he stopped complaining about his canceled Tallahassee trip. Second accident was one of the other cutters. He just finished a smaller pylolith spike when I saw him dip one of his legs down. It looked like he had just stepped wrong, but there was this look of genuine surprise on his face. Then we heard a pop, like something exploding, and the guy screamed like a wounded animal. This repetitive shriek, over and over as he clutched his leg. When we got to him, I could see most of his foot and part of his leg had been crushed. Not just a sprain or something, but mangled. You could barely tell there was a foot at the end. It looked like cloth-covered meat. When they carried him off, he was delirious. I heard him mumble as they shut the ambulance door. Breathing. Breathing, breathing. If it had been any other job, we'd have called it quits long ago. One workplace accident, it happens. But 2 on such short notice? No, that doesn't happen. Problem was, it felt like the bigwigs were one step away from shutting us down all over again. They hounded us with that fact every chance they got. The foreman would slide in a comment about it when he could. Like, at the end of every shift, I gave him an update on our progress. He always asked if things had gone smoothly, and whenever I said it did, he'd just respond, "Good. Don't know how we could afford keeping this afloat if it didn't." Every damn time. So yeah, we had to make do. It was dirty work for dirty people, but what choice did we have? No one else was hiring, and getting the whole crew to another site on short notice was impossible. You don't spend that kind of money on a whim, and there was no standing contract lurking around the corner. These kind of jobs take months of planning and contract negotiation. You'll be eating well into your savings long before you see a paycheck. We kept having trouble with our gear. Not just because things bend and break, that's normal. Wear and tear is a part of the job. The problem was that we had no idea what kind of supports we were looking at, and most of our equipment was still at the tunnel site. We kept having trouble with the ground shifting. Sometimes when we dug out the pyloliths, the dirt would collapse. It wasn't bad enough to hurt anyone, but it was frustrating. We had a bunch of sandbags and supports on the old dig site, but we weren't allowed to get them. I kept hearing things around the site. The guy who'd inhaled pylolith dust complained about losing his sense of taste. The guy who had his foot crushed was admitted to psychiatric care. Another guy kept talking about how he found this black door at his apartment complex that he couldn't remember having seen before. Just a whole set of strange rumors. Every day felt like walking into a ghost story. Someone had something eerie to say. My first unusual experience was nowhere near as dramatic. I was working the water jet cutter when I accidentally angled it downward. I left it on a little too long and cut into the rock surrounding the mineral. At first, I thought I'd hit a sewer line, but that would mean it was inches from the surface. There was no way that was true. But the ground erupted with this foul, black, organ-like ichor, like fish guts in mineral oil. I got out of there real quick, and the moment I stepped out of the hole, the dirt collapsed around me, almost like the ground shook a little. On our third week, some people got sick. We thought it was a stomach bug going around, but we figured out the common denominator. Everyone who'd gotten sick had regularly eaten dairy products for lunch or breakfast. Turns out, on closer inspection, that a lot of the dairy spoiled around the dig site, like to the point where we could track it just by looking at it. If we left the chocolate milk out in the open, the damn thing would be a solid white mold before the end of the day. So yeah, no dairy on the dig site. I remember once in the break room, 6 of us were sitting around, just chatting, and this guy joins us with a yogurt. He knows we're not supposed to eat dairy, but he doesn't care anymore. He's staring straight ahead, shoveling spoonfuls into his mouth. I don't need to look to see that it's gone bad. I can smell it. We can all smell it. And he just sits there, chewing it down like he doesn't have a care in the world. "You can't eat that stuff," someone mumbles. "You'll get sick." The guy turns his head and licks the container clean. He doesn't even blink. "You don't think what we're doing is sick?" he asks. "You think this is okay?" "It's a job. Calm down." "We're all sick in the head," the guy says, clutching his head. "Parasites." He didn't stay long. After starting a third fight that same day, we had to let him go. Coming home every day was like coming up for air after a long dive. Everything felt brighter, and I'd happily do whatever was asked of me. Changing diapers? No problem. Taking out the trash? Wonderful. Anything and everything was better than staying another damn minute at the site. Thinking about going back the next day made me feel like there was a rock in the pit of my stomach. I'd look in the bathroom mirror, trying to convince myself to get through one more day. But while I might not be the best at being a homebody, my wife rightfully pointed out that I was doing worse than usual. She was right, I was. It wasn't a conscious thing, but once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. For example, I would put all the dishes into a vertical pile instead of in the dishwasher. There was just something hypnotic about arranging them in a pattern. I would sometimes stand in front of the open refrigerator, holding my hands out like I was warming them by a fire. It got to the point where I was scared to be alone with my baby girl. What if I forgot her on the changing table? I couldn't live with myself if she got hurt. And still, we needed the money. Rent was going up, expenses were going up, and we needed a new set of tires for the car. We'd already sold off our spare car. We couldn't afford to go without one. It was bad enough that we had to share one. I remember this one night, as I was standing by my baby's crib, she was having trouble going back to sleep, so I leaned in to sing. Problem is, I couldn't remember the words. I'd never written them down or anything, so there was this sudden sense of loss in me, like I'd forgotten something that was a part of me instead of just a song. And my girl, she could tell. She was screaming her little heart out, begging me to remember. And I stood there, opening and closing my mouth like a fish out of water, trying to explain that the words just weren't there. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. "I'm so sorry." When she fell asleep that night, it wasn't because she felt safe or cared for. It was exhaustion, just like me. By that time, coming to the site felt like walking into purgatory. One guy's off in the corner, hurling his guts out. One guy's crying on a bench. One's lying flat on his back, looking up at the sky. Two guys don't even show up for work. We barely make progress. What little we get is mostly from what we'd started the previous shift. Around lunch, one guy was taking off his protective gear and going to town on the pylolith like he was a sick cow with a salt lick. We had to pry him off and send him home. He laughed the whole way. By late afternoon, I was the only one working on this one particular pylolith. The damn thing was big enough that I'd have trouble lifting it by myself. I had to dig a little deeper than usual to get to the base, and I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. By the time I pulled down the water cutter, the cable dislodged something and the entire hole collapsed, with me in it. I was buried under the dirt. Thank God for all that gear. I was lying face down in the dirt. I could breathe a little thanks to my gas mask in the porous ground, but it was like sucking air through a straw. I barely knew what was up or down. No matter which direction I pushed, I felt like something was pushing back. It's like the ground was trying to absorb me. I wasn't down for long, but in that moment, I felt this intense sense of dread. Not just a claustrophobic panic, but something else. I could imagine myself being stuck there, solidified as a relic in eternal stasis, like watching myself fossilize. All sense of time and passage of the world melted away. I could imagine the years flying by, leaving me helpless. If I'd been down there for 1,000 years, would I even want to get back up? By the time they pulled me out, I was screaming. I don't remember, but I was. Apparently, I was begging for them to put me back in the ground. At the end of the day, I was sitting across from one of the machine operators. He was trying to have a glass of water, but he ended up throwing it out. It tasted funny. "We got to do something about the equipment," he said. "We have tens of thousands of dollars still stuck in those tunnels. Hundreds of thousands, maybe. You think they're happy to leave it there? You honestly think they care?" "I care. Hell, I'll take it off their hands if they ain't using it." "You're not suggesting we steal from the company." "What company?" he laughed. "Do you even know who we're working for? You know what we're doing? You see any workers' comp going out to the guy who's saying everything tastes like gasoline?" I shook my head. I didn't like it, but he was right. He took off his hard hat, dropping it on the table. "I say we get our fair share. Split it right down the middle," he said. "You in?" "I'm in." I told my wife I'd be late the next day. 3 guys volunteered to help pick things up after our shift. There was a fair chance that we wouldn't get anything, but at that point, we didn't care. Some of us were desperate to just get a big enough paycheck to cash out and make a run for it. We didn't want to be there anymore. None of us did. We drove down to the old tunnels and prepared ourselves. One guy brought a 2-wheeler, another brought flashlights, and one brought walkie-talkies. We were going to turn the power on, but it was easy to get lost down there. Half the map wasn't finished, and most of the rooms were dead ends. We could get lost on the best of days, and we were barely functional. We made our way into the tunnels, keeping in touch as we went. It didn't take long for us to find some personal items, but there was quite a bit more to it. We could tell others had been down there. There were a whole bunch of things we hadn't seen before. Some of it I could barely understand. For example, there was this one drill that looked like an 8-foot-long syringe on a rail, leading to a hole in the wall. That's not what we were there for, but I couldn't help but raise my eyebrow to that. While the others found some gear, I decided to look a little further in. There was this one space I'd been working in just before we got shut down that I knew had a backpack full of seismic measuring equipment. It didn't take all that long for me to find my way back there, but the backpack was long gone. Figures. That thing alone was at least 25 grand. As I was about to head back to the others, I swept my flashlight across the black door. I didn't remember that ever being there. I checked in with the others over the walkie, and they were still trying to dislodge one of the backup drills. I had some time, so I decided to check it out. I stepped inside just as the walkie crackled to life again. Got the power. Hold on to something. Seconds later, there was a hum and a crackle. I swept my flashlight across the room, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. It was a small, cube-shaped room, with the furthermost wall being pale white dirt. I saw there was a light fixture overhead, so I searched the wall for a switch. I found it and turned it on, just to see if there was something I'd missed. The moment the light came on, felt like staring into the sun. I hadn't realized how used I'd gotten to the dark. That and the light seemed to be some kind of UV. It wasn't just bright, it was warm. The moment it turned on, I saw the wall shift. Not by much, just a twitch. Dirt don't move like that. The ground shook as people started calling out on the walkie. Someone was screaming about a burst water pipe, and another kept going, "What the hell?" over and over. I could hear the sound of metal bending and breaking as supports snapped, making the tunnels outside crumble. I could hear these blocks of stone, each one heavy enough to crush my car, falling like raindrops. The wall moved, the ground moved. I was standing still, watching solid concrete roll beneath me. The light flickered, a whole section of wall roiled like liquid, only to reveal this enormous glass-like surface. I stepped closer, watching these whirling colors slosh from left to right, up and down, like an organic membrane suspended in gelatin. Blue lines spreading out like the petals of a sunflower. As I step back and take in the whole picture, my breath gets stuck in my throat. The entire wall is the bottom half of an eye. A bright blue eye, adjusting to the sudden bright light. Saturday, if you're listening to this, I'd like to file a complaint because you always jump scare me. I don't know how I get jump scared reading a story. I've never felt anything like in that moment. It's like the sky keeps falling, over and over. Like you're taking a step back, even though you're standing still, making the world feel smaller with every breath. I could barely understand it. My legs felt so small that I couldn't feel myself walking. The power cut out. The bright blue pupil disappeared, leaving the outline of the shape lingering in my mind's eye. The sounds of the outside world faded away. I could hear the screaming in the walkie like a distant whisper. I could sense the rumble as the tunnels collapsed. I could feel the weight of the organic slosh as a mass of nerves far larger than me moved at breakneck speed, left to right, displacing the air. "It's coming down," someone cried in the walkie. "Get the hell out, it's all coming down." But I couldn't move. I looked straight ahead, into the darkness, and pushed my hand back towards the door. I couldn't open it. There was a blockage on the outside. The concrete ceiling was starting to crack. My mind pendulumed between sobering fear and a mind-gutting sense of hollowness. I was a father. I was nothing. I was being buried alive. I was pointless. All the while, I hear this surreal sound of something beyond my comprehension of scale starting to move, and I realize I'm going to die down there. I'm going to be crushed or left to suffocate, and there's this little voice in the back of my head whispering at me that there's a very real chance I don't come home tonight, that my baby girl isn't going to sleep well ever again. And I just break. I absolutely break. I slam my body against the door. I scream and shout and beat my fists on the metal sheeting. I step back and brace myself, throwing my weight at it, but it doesn't even budge. The voices on the walkie aren't even saying words anymore, having devolved into a panic screeching. I step away from the door, towards the eye. I fumble in the dark, picking up a fistful of concrete to use as a weapon. I move closer, ready to plunge my fist into the surface of the eye when I notice something. I'm stepping in liquid. I didn't hear a water pipe burst, not in here. I fumble for my flashlight. I barely manage to pick it up as my hands keep failing me. But as I turn it on, I realize there's a thin layer of water lining the floor, an oily kind of salt water. Looking up at the eye, I see it leaking at the edges. Tears? Something in me clicks. The rapid eye movement, the sudden sense of panic and collapse. It dawns on me that I've seen this before. I've seen it dozens of times. It's just like when my baby girl wakes up in the middle of the night looking for her papa. That's all it is. And I think about that moment when I was buried at the dig site, with that sense of the world passing me by. I wouldn't want to wake from that. I wouldn't want to know which of my friends were dead or alive, which family members made it. I wouldn't want to know just how alone I really was. I'd rather stay a fossil. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was it the whole time. Maybe we'd been cleaning the scalp of something having a really, really bad dream. I turned off my flashlight and stepped a little closer. I could feel this thrumming movement coming from the membrane as nerves contracted, pushing out bucket after bucket of liquid. Meanwhile, I'm closing my eyes and thinking about an imaginary hand placed behind a tender head, fussing about going to sleep, wispy hair getting caught between my fingers. At that moment, the words returned to me. The lullaby. Oh, I fuff, my little, little one. Oh, I fuff, my little, little one. I sing it again and again and again. I'm imagining that little bundle in my arms and how it settles into a rhythm, how her breathing steadies with mine, a little hand wrapping around my finger and then letting go as the dreams take hold. And after a while, I realize the wall has stopped moving. It's just white dirt. Nothing is moving, collapsing, or breaking. It's just me in a dark room and my workmates trying to move a boulder outside the door. Something has gone back to sleep. When we got out, things had gone completely to shit. Car alarms were going off, street lights had died, fire hydrants were pouring into the street. Waiting for us just outside were 2 patrol vehicles, ready to ask us some serious and uncomfortable questions. The whole ordeal was categorized as a localized seismic event. The company decided not to press any charges. They just had us trespassed. But even that would eventually be overturned. See, they still needed someone to work the dig site. There was the pylolith to cut, and there was no one around willing to do it. And honestly, who was more experienced working with this stuff than me and my crew? We had started to get the hang of it. We could make up our own rules, and now that I had an idea of what we're dealing with, I could do it in a way that wouldn't get us all killed. So yeah, we got back to work. I've been doing pylolith digs for years now. We figured out a good routine and procedure, allowing us to rotate crew in a way that doesn't get us sent to the hospital. I've got about 30 guys working with me. There's not a lot of demand for it, but what demand there is pays very well. I don't think you'll find any Craigslist postings for pylolith diggers anytime soon, but we're out there. Sometimes it just looks like a construction site. Sometimes they don't bother trying to hide it. People see a jackhammer and roll their eyes, hoping we don't stick around for long. My girl isn't a baby anymore, but in another sense of the word, she absolutely is. I've managed to scrape together a pretty good life for her. I work weekdays, along with every second and third weekend of the month, but I get the full first week of the month completely off. Just 2 paid vacation weeks a year, though. But the hourly rates are just... I'll admit, I'm a bit spoiled. I could sign off on a new pool and it wouldn't break our budget. But I feel like I had to take a moment to look back at it all. Not just because it was a monumental day of my life, but because it changed something in me. I may be the smallest, most insignificant thing in whatever world this is, but I'm still here. I can still do something. And if I can do that one goddamn thing right, is that not enough reason to do it? I'm thinking, whenever I'm gray and gone, is my girl gonna remember the fancy vacations and the new car smell of our family Hyundai? Or is she gonna remember the times I sung her to sleep? I don't need an answer. I know it. I feel it. And somewhere deep underground, there's something that feels the same. The next story today is also from r/no sleep from a very talented author named Let's Split Up. An influencer who died on camera keeps showing up in my videos. Guys, it's my worst nightmare. Pretty much what the title says. Any picture I take, any video I record, always, every time, the body of a dead influencer shows up in the background. If you're wondering, do you know this influencer? No, maybe. Depends on how into fitness stuff you are. His channel was doing fine, I guess, but he never got truly viral. Well, not until he died, that is. He was caught in bed with a woman whose husband came home to find her undressed and stammering excuses. The fitness influencer tried to hide from discovery by sneaking out onto the balcony and climbing over the railing and clinging so he was out of sight. And he clung for a few minutes. He was a fitness guy after all, in pretty good shape. Meanwhile, a crowd gathered below, and some asshole filmed the whole thing. But then the woman's husband stepped out onto the balcony, and the fitness influencer, he must have freaked out because he lost his grip. And he fell to his death. The footage of his death immediately went viral. Of course it was taken down after, but not before everyone on the internet had taken clips and screenshots of him plunging, and then of his broken doll body slamming into the pavement 5 stories below. And that's the image of him that shows up in the background of all my videos and pictures. The dead influencer, lying just as he was when I filmed him. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm the asshole who filmed his death. Well, not just me. I filmed it with a friend, a dude named Kenzo. I was behind the camera holding it, and Kenzo was in front of it. Kenzo is always the one in front of the camera because while some people are incredibly photogenic, I am whatever the opposite of that is. I blink in every picture, my hair's always blowing the wrong way, even my boobs look 2 different sizes, one perking like a teen's and the other sagging like it's whispering secrets to my belly button. But forget about my boobs, we're talking about the body. That's funny. We came across the scene by chance while driving around, and Kenzo leapt out of the car. See, Kenzo and I are also wannabe influencers. In high school, we started our first YouTube channel, and since Kenzo is the Ken to my asymmetrical boob Barbie, i.e., he's got Riz while I've got nerdy editing skills, he's the one who always appears on screen. Our footage of Fitness Bro's fatal plunge went immediately viral. Even after the video got taken down, prompting me to repost clips of Kenzo's commentary on the scene, minus the footage showing the man's body, the story kept climbing, as did our subscriber count. And if you're wondering, did my conscience ever whisper that maybe, just maybe, using a man's tragic and scandalous death was a little morally bankrupt? Nope. I couldn't hear such pangs of conscience over the euphoric rush of all those new subscribers. And I mean, we were trending for days. It was only later, when I was editing our latest video, that I spotted the glitch, let's call it. The glitch of a dead body in the frame. The hell? I whispered. It was in a video we'd shot by the poolside of Kenzo reacting to different super duper hot sauces. Yep, our content is super original. On the concrete beside the pool in the corner of the screen lay the fitness influencer, looking like he'd been cut and pasted from our viral footage. I sent the clip to Kenzo. "Oh my gosh, you evil diabolical genius," he exclaimed. "People will go crazy." Apparently, he assumed I'd put the body there, maybe as rage bait to troll the people who'd clutched their pearls over our initial footage of the man's death. And yeah, that would have been a brilliant marketing strategy, but I said I didn't put it there. It was far enough to the side in the frame, right at the corner, that I was able to cut it out and post the video without it. Even if it would generate clicks, I was beginning to feel the tiniest churnings of queasiness that I'd eventually realize was my conscience. But after it went up, the comments exploded anyway. The body was back in the frame. I quickly removed the video from our feed, only to see that notifications were blowing up on Instagram too. Kenzo had posted a selfie on the beach with the waves in the background, and the dead body was there, lying on the wet sand, like he'd cut and pasted it from our footage. No, not just cut and pasted. It looked a little more gross, like it was in the early stages of decomposition. That settled it. It had to be a filter he'd installed, and I called him up to hash it out with him and found out that he was about to call me to demand if I'd hacked his phone or something. So we met up, and we tested it. And in every pic we took of Kenzo, there in the background was the dead body. "So," he said after our test, "I guess I'm haunted?" Yeah. This is... Alright guys, sorry. This is like... What is this reaction? "So I guess I'm haunted, huh?" "Yeah, I guess so." No. Anyways, let's continue. I tried out other cameras, even a Polaroid. The dead influencer was even on the Polaroid. So, after we got high and drunk and spent a good 24 hours in complete freakout mode, we finally sat down to brainstorm solutions to this decomposing influencer problem. Like, what exactly should we do about this? And how are we going to continue our channel if he kept appearing in all of our videos? We did the only thing that made sense for us. The Decomposing Influencer series was our biggest ever. What? It got us clicks. And yes, every alarm bell in my brain clanged with the warning that we were messing with something that definitely shouldn't be messed with. But I mean, do I even need to tell you how insane our metrics were? We couldn't have asked for better content. Kenzo promised $1,000 to anyone who could debunk him, and challenged anyone who believed the haunting to be a hoax to show up with a camera and a live stream. Everywhere and anywhere we went, he urged people to snap pictures of him with the hashtag #HauntedKenzo. It's not a prank, it's not staged, it's all real, he claimed. We were so high on our skyrocketing subscriber base that we barely noticed the spookiness. The body was decomposing by the day, but so what? All the better to farm engagement. It wasn't until later we realized it. In addition to rotting on screen, it was actually moving closer. One of our followers put together a time-lapse. In it, the body could be seen vividly rotting, turning discolored and bloating, and all the while moving closer to the camera. And not just that. It happened so slowly we didn't notice it at first. But in the original video, the dead guy was lying on the pavement facing away from the camera. In all our recent videos, he was turned toward the lens, his sightless eyes fixed on us. What happens when he gets right up next to you? I asked Kenzo. I don't know, Kenzo said, obviously chilled. We both sat there in deeply contemplative silence for a moment before he added, we gotta get it on film. You know that scene in Austin Powers where there's a dude standing with his hand out, screaming and screaming, while Austin Powers drives a steamroller and motions him to get out of the way, and he just doesn't? He just stands there until it flattens him? With my camera, I'm like Powers driving the steamroller, with Kenzo in my sights facing down his inevitable doom. In the last selfie he ever took, Kenzo was lying on a sofa, and the dead man was right on the floor beside the couch. Lips pulled back in a rictus grin and eyes leaking from his head. The next day, Kenzo disappeared. The popular rumor is that Kenzo faked his own disappearance as a publicity stunt. Some people are now claiming the whole thing was always a hoax. But what most people don't realize is that there's an unreleased video of him in his final moments. See, we were scheduled to do a shoot of his final confrontation with the decomposing influencer over by the condo where the guy had died. It seemed thematically appropriate, and we figured it would boost our views. Once we were on location, I framed him in the camera view and asked him, "How are you feeling about today's planned confrontation with the decomposing influencer?" He laughed and said, "Well, I can't see him, so it's really hard to know what to expect when we meet." "Oh, that's right," I said. "To you, it's just an empty sidewalk. You won't see him until editing. What if he... Holy shit!" What I remember is how Kenzo cocked his head. While on my camera screen, a bloated body was rising up and reaching for him. And even when he couldn't see the body, he must have felt when the hand gripped him, because his eyes flashed impossibly wide, his mouth gaping in a shriek of absolute terror. And then he was gone. Just gone. I've rewatched the video over and over. It doesn't change. I haven't posted it. Because I've finally realized something. Like I mentioned, I'm not photogenic, right? Maybe that's why it's taken me so long to notice. I assumed the dead influencer was going for Kenzo, and yeah, he definitely did grab Kenzo and even appeared in selfies Kenzo took without me. But in the videos that I took of Kenzo, the body wasn't actually getting closer to him. It was getting closer to the camera lens, to me. And when it finally grabbed Kenzo, in the moments after he disappeared, it was still on screen and turned its head to glare at me. I stopped filming. I haven't taken any photos or videos since then. I've taken down our channel and deleted all our content, hoping that'll appease the dead dude. But I got caught in the background of someone else's selfie recently, and he was there. He was right there, more decomposed than ever, reaching for me. He hasn't gotten close enough to grab me yet, but given how hard it is to avoid smartphones these days, I can't help but wonder how long until I, too, feel the rotting hands dragging me down to whatever special place in hell is waiting for those who sold their souls for clicks. Guys, this is a Logan Paul moment right here. If you know, you know. Yeah, I feel like it kind of goes without discussion that these people are gonna rot in hell because that's a terrible thing to do. But, I guess they learned their lesson, and the clicks and going viral and all that stuff, it's not worth it. It's from r/no sleep from user horrorjunkie123. When my aunt passed away, I agreed to take in her pet parrot. She's been telling me strange things. My Aunt Liza passed away last month. She was 47 years old. Aunt Liza's cause of death was determined to be an accidental overdose. As someone who has overcome struggles with addiction, her passing left a mark on me. I suppose that's a big reason why I agreed to take in her 14-year-old African Grey, Lulu. I'd overheard Uncle Frank telling my mother that he was going to have to give her up to an animal shelter. That just felt wrong. I've always believed that pets are family, so I told Uncle Frank I'd take her. The first week was a major adjustment. Lulu expressed obvious confusion at her new environment. "Where's Liza? Where's Liza?" She repeated the phrase. She repeated it so often in the first days with me that I knew I needed to take action. I wasn't sure if Lulu was capable of understanding, but it was worth a shot. "Where's Liza? Where's Liza?" I took a deep breath. I approached Lulu's perch and gazed her in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Lulu. Liza is gone." The bird cocked her head to the side. "Liza is gone." "Yes, Liza is gone." A tear trickled down my cheek. I didn't think it would be that hard. Saying it out loud somehow made it more real. Lulu didn't respond. Instead, she turned around and faced the wall. Lulu's behavior started to change a few days after that. Initially, she wouldn't say much aside from the occasional "Liza is gone." Then she started saying things that I'd never heard her repeat before. The first incident was after work on a random Thursday. I'd barely had a chance to put my purse down when the words met my ears. "Where's your owner, huh?" I froze. Where had Lulu gotten that from? The shock quickly dissipated. Parrots have good memories. She could have heard that from years ago for all I knew. Only later did I realize that I should have taken Lulu's words more seriously. The next incident didn't occur for another week. Lulu was seemingly coming around to her old self. She was active and a total menace to my houseplants. R.I.P. Fern and Det. It's actually a really good name. Additionally, Lulu was talking a lot. As her mantra, "Where's Liza?" went out of fashion, I began to grow accustomed to her more common phrases. "Hey there" was her go-to greeting for when I arrived home. "Aw, is someone hungry?" was an indicator that she needed to eat. And at random points in the day, she absolutely loved to shout, "What you talking about, Willis?" for no reason at all. Not to say that those were the only phrases she used. No, she picked up new words all the time, but those were the most recurring. Even with her colorful vocabulary, I was shocked to hear what she had to say when I woke up one morning. I could hear Lulu squawking from the room over, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. I tried to go back to sleep, but after 10 straight minutes of Lulu's muffled yelling, I decided to roll out of bed for the day. I stepped into the hallway, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and I froze. Clear as day, Lulu repeated, "That bitch, I'll end her." I was stunned. Sure, Lulu could be a potty mouth at times, but I had never heard her utter anything so violent. The inflection told me that whoever she had picked it up from was not messing around. I tentatively approached the living room where Lulu's cage was kept, and I poked my head in. I surveyed the room before determining that no axe-wielding murderers were lying in wait to chop my head off. I opened Lulu's cage and let her hop onto my arm. "What's wrong, girl? Where'd you hear that from?" Lulu cocked her head to the side, black eyes studying me, before she responded, "Aw, is someone hungry?" Fortunately, Lulu's newest catchphrase didn't last very long. As time went on, and we grew more accustomed to one another, I began to leave Lulu's cage open at night. That way, she had access to water if she needed it. I didn't have to worry about her making a mess, unless a houseplant was involved. Aunt Liza had trained her well. She rarely ever left her cage past dark. That's why I was so shocked to find her shrieking at me in the middle of the night last week. I was awoken from a deep slumber by a high-pitched scream. I instantly recognized it as Lulu's. She was beside my bed, nearly touching my ear, repeating the same phrase over and over again. "Hey there, hey there." My eyes shot open. I bolted upright, looking for any sign of a disturbance. My vision was slow to adjust. When it did, I realized exactly why Lulu was shouting. Someone was sitting on the edge of my bed. Nope, nope, nope. I don't know about you guys, but I am booking it. This house is getting burnt to the ground. Hell no. I'm normally able to avoid jump scares when I'm reading these stories, but this one got me. Anyways, let's continue to see who's sitting on the edge of the bed. The silhouette of a hooded figure faced the wall, unmoving. The person didn't react to Lulu's shrieks. It was as if they wanted to be seen. I sat still as a statue. In my times of distress, my fight or flight instinct doesn't kick in. Instead, I freeze. That's why I couldn't bring myself to move when the figure turned toward me. Even in the darkness, I could see that they were wearing a mask. It was plain white with a smiley face on the front. The figure produced something from their pocket. My blood turned to ice. The intruder brandished a knife at me. They held it up to my neck amid a cacophony of frantic "hey there's." Lulu launched an attack at the figure, clawing at their mask and hoodie. They acted as if they didn't notice. I was so terrified that I couldn't even bring myself to breathe. The intruder pressed the knife to my flesh, sending a small stream of scarlet trickling down my neck. They leaned in close and whispered into my ear. "This is your only warning. Mess with us again and you're dead." With that, my assailants stood, put the knife back into their hoodie pocket, and walked out of the room. Lulu stopped attacking once they were gone and joined me at my bedside. Her frantic shouts had devolved into quiet, pensive whispers. "Hey there, hey there." For a few moments, I was too shocked to react. I'd seen my life flash before my eyes just seconds prior. I truly thought I was going to die. Once I came back to my senses, I locked my bedroom door, called 911, and cradled Lulu close to my chest as uncontrollable sobs racked my body. The police came up with nothing. I'm so scared and confused. Did I unknowingly piss someone off? Is this a case of mistaken identity? I don't have the answers. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that apartment. I was already on a month-to-month lease, so I got us out of there as soon as I could. Despite the police's assurance that they would increase presence in the area, I couldn't risk another encounter. I've been settling into the new place just fine. The move went smoothly, and Lulu was taken to the apartment nicely. I even bought a new houseplant, obviously kept away from Lulu at all times. There's just one thing that's been concerning me. This place has thin walls. Sometimes, late at night, I can hear Lulu speaking from the other room, and she says the same thing every time. "Hey there." Yo, all I gotta say to the OP is Lulu's got your back. Lulu saw the attacker and it was on sight. Lulu was letting you know that there was somebody there. Hey there. But yeah, all jokes aside, there's actually no part 2 to this story, at least not yet, but it leaves me thinking, Aunt Liza, did she really, quote unquote, accidentally overdose? I don't know, it's pretty suspicious. And then Frank wanting to immediately send Lulu to an animal shelter. I mean, it's very, very sus. Even though there's no part 2, I kind of like stories like this that kind of leave you to come up with the answer. Also, RIP Fernadette. The next one's from r/nosleep from user Diligent Schedule 465. The ferry boat has been coming to town for 10 years. It cannot be allowed to reach land. I go out to the cliffs like I have every Wednesday for the past 10 years. The gravel crunches under my boots, the wind catching my hair with rough fingers. I keep pulling strands out of my mouth as I climb, my thighs aching. The path up to the top of the cliffs was steep when I was 16, and every year it's felt steeper. People ask me sometimes why I bother to keep coming out like this when my legs don't show any sign of getting better, but it's worth it for the vantage point. There's a few signs up at the top warning people to stay away from the very edge of the rocks. There's even a picnic table, although it's weathered and worn from lack of use. No one comes here anymore, not since the boat started to come. I don't need to go right to the edge of the cliffs to see it. I lean my cane against the table, I need it less when I'm not actively climbing, and wander out towards the edge. The water is gunmetal blue, dark, and deep as sleep. The waves are a steady rhythmic roar. The ocean's voice is strong. Not one day that I've been coming to the cliffs has it faltered. Even if the waves are quiet when I come, it's like a great cat curled up and resting between hunts. Don't for a moment think that I'm any safer than I was before. The water whispers as it laps against the rocks. Don't for a moment think that I can't reach you where you are. As I walk to a safe vantage point, a horn echoes out across the water. I flinch. I can't help it. From this distance, the boat is a tiny thing, just a speck on the horizon. I reach out, pinching it between my fingers, pretending that I can pluck it from the sea like a tick. I know what I would see if I was closer. It looks like a remarkably normal ferry boat in most respects. There's no smoke coming from the smokestack, though. When it gets close, you can't see the crew. If it gets really close, you can see the wheels turning and the lines being pulled without anyone there to pull them. This far, I can't see any of that detail. I can only see the shape of the ship itself as it comes slowly, inexorably closer. They don't know where it comes from. Ironically, that's one of the main things that people do know about it. Whenever anyone new to town asks about it, that's the first thing that they're always told. It first appeared on a Friday evening 10 years ago. School had just ended for the year, and my friends and I were celebrating. If you asked our parents, we were all collected over at Malay's house for a sleepover, eating wat made by her mother and cramming our mouths full of junk food and junkier movies before passing out in a comfortable haze of good food and the warm feeling of accomplishment at another year closed out. And we had done that. I could still taste the onion on the back of my tongue, mingling with the bright pickly taste of the malic acid-coated candy that Ryan had brought by the bucketful. But we were 16 and 17, old enough to consider ourselves basically grown adults, and Malay's parents were basically convinced by now that the lot of us were too lame to do anything exciting, so they didn't mind if she went with us, and the beach was close enough that I could walk there without too much pain or discomfort. Not no pain, it was never no pain, not even then, but I'd already learned back then that if I wanted to participate in life at all, I was gonna need to learn to hurt. There was only so long that you could watch movies, and when the credits rolled, someone made the suggestion. One thing led to another, and we were shoving on jackets and fishing phones out of couch cushions and making our way out into the cold night, on the path down towards the sea. I don't remember the walk there that well, nor our time on the beach before it came. It comes back to me in snatches and flashes. Malay's bright laugh, like golden bubbles bursting in the night. My lungs aching from the cold, my hair tossed about by the wind, Sparrow winding it around their fingers. The fire Ryan built crackling, sparks drifting up like tiny stars in the night. The rough texture of Sparrow's denim jacket against my cheek, their body warm against mine. I wish I remembered it more. Even a scant decade later, the memories are so hard to touch. They're all collapsed, down into salt and sea foam. I was curled up against Sparrow's chest, listening to Malay and Ryan tease each other as they roasted marshmallows that we'd nicked from the snack cabinet back at Malay's house. I was half asleep, full of sugar and roasted meat and alcohol that we definitely weren't supposed to have. Sparrow was idly petting my hair as they watched the fire, occasionally chiming in with the other two. I felt warm, like I was swathed in a thick blanket. The firelight made a soft orange bubble against the night. I remember that still, how it felt like nothing could touch me. I don't remember the joke that Malay made. I wish I did. I remember so little about it now. Malay said something and Ryan laughed. His voice was starting to level out, the cracks getting fewer and fewer as his voice soothed down into its adult shape. He had a scraggly beard, one that he used to run oil through every morning in the hopes of getting it to grow faster. He was laughing, and then the sound of the foghorn cut through the night. I remember the strange violence of it, the way my bubble popped around me, the night stretching its hands into our little cocoon. I sat up straight, startled out of the half-dreaming haze I'd been drifting in. Malay had dropped the cooking fork, the tip in the fire. Her marshmallow started to smoke and char black, but she didn't notice. She was staring down the beach, towards the waves. "What the hell?" Sparrow said out loud. Their head was turned away from the fire, looking out into the night. Malay pointed. Ryan turned to look, and I turned, following their gazes. I couldn't identify what the shape was they were looking at. It was too dark, and at first it all looked like it was a dark shape against something in the night, blocking out the light of the stars in the city. There were no lights on it to help resolve it into something that made sense. Then the horn sounded again, and I realized it was a boat. A boat, aground at a beach with no dock, with no lights. I couldn't even see a red or green light to tell me what side of the boat I was looking at. We should go. I had never heard Ryan sound that nervous before. His voice wasn't shaking. It was quiet and steady like a hand gripping the back of your neck. It was that had me struggling to my feet, Sparrow helping me with a strong hand. They bent down, picking up my cane to hand to me. Malay started throwing sand on the fire, stamping out the embers. I should say that despite all being 16 and 17, we didn't try to explore the boat. We didn't go closer. We didn't shout out, calling out to the sailors we thought had to be there. We didn't try to explore. We didn't antagonize. We didn't linger. We didn't. I can look back 10 years later and regret that we didn't run immediately. I think at the time, I'd thought that it might be an organized crime thing. A silly thought of a teenager who'd hardly seen a gun in real life, but what would you have thought? A boat aground at a beach with no lights, totally eerie and quiet, miles away from the docks. I thought as long as we didn't see people, we would have time to collect our stuff and move away. I thought we had time to get away. What would you have thought? We collected our stuff the fastest we ever had. We didn't speak. Sparrow threw our food in a bag. Ryan grabbed Malay's coat, throwing it on her shoulders. We left the beer. We shouldn't have, but we were 17 and scared. What would you have done? Silently, we picked up our things, pulled on our own coats, and slipped away down the beach. We walked in tense silence, resisting the urge to look behind us. Sparrow helped support me without being asked, letting me lean against them, helping me find my footing. I was slower. The sand made me even more unsteady on my feet. I could feel Malay's anxiety and frustration. She kept glancing back at me. My face felt hot. If you've never been the most disabled person in a group, you might not know the prickling shame of it. Even if the people you're around don't say anything, it clings around the edges anyway, sticking to you like burrs to a coat. I clung to Sparrow, focused on ignoring the pain and keeping my footing. I was looking down at the sand, trying to make sure I didn't step on a rock and turn my foot when I heard Ryan stop. I looked up and froze. For a moment, I thought we'd been turned around. It was impossible, but it was the explanation that best preserved reality as I knew it. Then my heart sank down to my stomach. I felt like the world tilted around me. It was coming home to find your house occupied by strangers. The boat was in front of us, dark shadow against the stars. I could feel Sparrow go tense against me. Malay took a step back. Ryan stood frozen. Then, as one, we turned, dropped our stuff, and started running. I ran. My legs screamed immediately. I didn't run, as a matter of course. Walking took enough effort, but the cold, freezing fear in my chest was enough to prompt a sprint. Sparrow's hand was tight on mine. They were on the track and field team and could easily outpace me, but they stayed behind, hand tight on mine like a vice as they tugged me forward. I don't think any of us had fomented anything approaching a plan. Sometimes the only thing you can think to do is run. If I'd known then that was about to happen, perhaps I would have, but then that's always what you tell yourself, isn't it? We had turned and ran back down the beach, the way we had come from. I remember looking up and seeing that the boat was gone and feeling a weird flare of hope. I could see the bright sparks of the city lights outlined against the sky. There was a path somewhere amongst the ice plants and the sand that would lead back up to asphalt and street lights. I had a thought somewhere in the back of my mind that surely that would mean safety. I didn't know what was happening the way I would later. I just knew that something was terribly wrong and the only thing to do was be as far away from it as possible. Malay and Ryan were running in front of us. I could barely see through the white flares of pain in my legs. I was gonna fall. I realized, a kind of awful fatalism I remember later. Adrenaline only goes so far. There's a point where it fails. My brain was full of a white, sticky fog. Pain has a way of driving out all other concerns. It's hard for me to describe what happened next. What happened and what was a product of pain and fear is hard to tell 10 years later. It looks like this in my memory. We were running, and I could almost see the gap in the ice plants where the pathway started when the foghorn sounded again. It was worse this time. If you've never heard a normal foghorn, they carry like no other sound in the world, like the bellow of some great undersea beast. When this sound went off, I couldn't help but think, somewhere through the haze of pain, that it sounded like a scream, an open mouth. It was followed immediately by another one, and this time my legs collapsed beneath me. I couldn't help it. It was past willpower and adrenaline, and down to the very mechanical limits of my joints, the limits of the pain my brain would tolerate. Sometimes your body just will not let you hurt any longer. As soon as I did, my hand slipped out from Sparrow's. They hadn't been expecting me to fall, and they weren't ready for it. I fell, collapsing down into the sand. The sound came again, and this time it was somehow louder. It filled the entire world. I curled up into a ball, covering my ears, which didn't at all manage to block anything out. I think I screamed. When the sound died down enough for me to open my eyes and look up, I saw a tableau that I can't forget. When I close my eyes, I can still see it. I see it when I sleep. The boat had returned, as impossible as that was, like a tiger circling its prey. It was closer than it was before. It seemed larger than it had before. It loomed like a wall of darkness. The water was wrong near it. I don't know why I remember that. I think that sometimes your brain just grabs onto details. The water wasn't lapping against it like it would against a normal ship. It was just coming in gentle waves against the shore, unaffected by the presence of the boat at all. Malay was the closest to the boat. I didn't see Ryan. I watched her walk towards the boat. I think I tried to call out towards her, but the horn sounded again, and my voice was swallowed by the boom. She walked towards the boat. She didn't look back towards me. I turned that part over in my mind, over and over again. She walked towards the boat and didn't look back. She walked towards the boat, and then, like I said, I was half out of my mind with pain and fear. It's hard to tell what's real and what wasn't. I can only tell you what I saw. She walked forward towards the boat, and it looked like the darkness opened up. I saw something, a rope? I couldn't see, curl around her hands. She didn't resist it. She walked forward into the darkness and was gone. Sparrow was closer to me. They were standing, staring at the boat. I watched them sway gently on their feet. They took a step forward, like they were going to follow Malay into the dark. I made a sound that I'd never made before. Some kind of wounded animal cry. I crawled forward. Sparrow! Sparrow! Sparrow turned. There was something strange about their expression, something hollow and empty, like a doll. I reached out a hand towards them. Sparrow, please. To my immense relief, Sparrow came towards me. I couldn't stand on my own. Even trying to lift myself up sent spikes through my flesh. They reached down, helping me to my feet. I buried my face under their neck and breathed for a second. Let's go, please. I hardly knew what I was saying. Sparrow didn't say anything. They just braced their grip on me and started walking towards the ship. What? It came out in a breathless little whisper. My lungs didn't seem to work like they wanted to work. They took another step forwards. I looked at their face, but their eyes didn't seem to want to focus on mine. Their eyes were dark. They were focused intently on the boat beyond. Sparrow, what? It's okay. I knew as soon as they spoke that something was unimaginably, awfully wrong. Sparrow didn't talk like that. Their voice was supposed to be high, fast, and sharp. They talked faster than they could get words actually out coherently most of the time. They didn't talk like this, soft, empty, and slow. It's okay. Their skin was so cold against mine. We'll be there in just a moment. I tried to stop, pulling away. No, we need the street, Sparrow. Don't you want to see it? They stopped, but they didn't turn away from the boat. Their grip was still strong on me. This time, they looked down, and I had the awful feeling they were still, somehow, looking through me. Their faint smile was like no expression I'd ever seen on their face before. What? It's here for us, Sparrow said, with that same empty beatific smile. They watch us, down in the deep below. They watch us with their eyes that aren't eyes, down in the deep dark, below the water, and they're tired of waiting. They have space for us down in the dark, below the water, below the ocean's floor. Don't you want to see? No. I yanked away, hard enough to slip out of Sparrow's grasp. I hit the sand, and my vision went white with pain. When it had receded enough for me to understand anything again, Sparrow was standing in front of me. I flinched, but they didn't grab for me. They leaned down, pressing a soft kiss against my forehead, before they stood up, smiling that awful smile that wasn't theirs. Just look, they said, in that same dreamy, dead, dull voice. Just look, can't you see? I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but as they turned away and started walking towards the ship, swaying slightly as they moved like they were drunk, I glanced down towards the dark wall of the ship as well. The darkness was different somehow now. Instead of just being empty darkness, it seemed to ripple like water. It rippled and distorted, and for some reason, despite an alarm starting to go off in the back of my brain, I couldn't make myself look away. In the darkness, I saw something moving. I wish I could describe to you what I saw. I wish I could make it make sense to someone who hadn't seen it. Any description I come up with seems to pale in comparison. In the darkness, I saw something look back at me. I saw eyes, but they weren't eyes. Eyes didn't move like that. They weren't eyes, but they could see. They could see inside me, and they promised me things. They promised me darkness, that they had space for me. There was a place below the waves, below the water, below the bottom of the ocean that was open for me. Humans couldn't live down there, but they promised me that I would live. They promised me that I would live forever. It was my legs that saved me in the end. As Sparrow disappeared, I tried to struggle forward towards the welcoming, waiting dark and ran up against my legs. I tried to brace some weight on my knee, and the resultant pain was like white fire. There was no room for darkness or eyes when I hurt like that. I tried again, and that time I think I fully lost consciousness for a moment. My ears were ringing. As soon as I could move or think again, I rolled over and threw up. When I looked up, the boat was gone. And that was that. What else am I supposed to do? I sat on the beach until the sun had started to turn the sky gray and pale, streaking the horizon with orange and yellow, and then I got up and limped home. It took hours longer than it was supposed to. Somewhere in the chaos, I'd lost my cane and never did find it again. I made do with a bad one from Walgreens for a while after that. I found out later that we hadn't been the only ones to see the boat. That should have been impossible, of course, but we were beyond that now. I didn't understand the world that I lived in anymore. Why shouldn't a ship have visited hundreds of people around the city in a single night? It was no more impossible than anything else I'd seen. There was chaos, I think. I didn't see much of it. I didn't leave my bedroom for a while after that. Instead, I slept through most of the summer, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb so I couldn't be bothered by the masses of texts and news articles discussing the mass disappearance. It all seemed so distant, so unreal. I knew what had happened. I knew where everyone was. I knew at the bottom of the sea, beneath the sand and coral, was something hungry and old and waiting. Everything else was just so much theater and pageantry compared to that. I kept seeing the boat whenever I slept. It wasn't all the same dream. I could be in the city, or swimming in the sea, or walking on the beach. Wherever it was, at some point, I would look up at the sky and there it would be. A dark shadow against the blue sky. I would see it and then I would feel it again. The touch of strange eyes and the opening of an abyss beneath me. I never told my parents about it. How could I? It wasn't the sort of thing that you could tell your parents. They wouldn't have understood. They wouldn't have understood what I meant when I said they were still waiting for me. Their eyes were still on me. They still had a space for me, beneath the waves. They were still watching me. I suppose it was fair that I watched them back. I turn away from the sea, beginning to walk back towards the pathway down to the parking lot. I don't need to stay now that I've laid eyes on it. It's not like it's going to move quickly. My phone rings. I fish it out of my pocket with one hand, unlocking it and holding it up to my ear. Hello? Sunshine. The voice is warm and gentle. How are you? I soften despite myself, even though I have to focus on still picking my way down the sand and rocks. Hi, Dad. Yeah, I'm okay. It's just my father and me these days. I'm long grown, but I still live at home. With my legs being what they are and my father's age being what it is, we do a lot better supporting each other. Homemades cost money that neither of us have. We're not as close as we were before everything, but we help each other out. It's a living. When my father speaks again, he sounds concerned. He doesn't like it when I leave without telling him at least that I'm leaving and when I'll be back, even if he's never even tried to prevent me from going anywhere I want. It's not that he's a helicopter parent, he's just scared. I can't really blame him. No one in town likes their people being out of sight these days. Where did you go? Just out to the cliff. I'm heading back now. He tries to not sound disturbed, but he does. And did you see it? I nod, before remembering that he can't see me. Yeah, it's miles out though. Should be months at least before it gets here. We have enough warning to prepare at least. You know I don't like that you go out there, he says. This time his voice is gentle, like someone speaking to a frightened animal or a child. I bristle, despite myself. It's fine, Dad. Nothing's gonna happen to me. I can't do anything at that distance. It needs you to be able to see it better for that. It's still a risk, he says. What if it calls you while you're all the way up there? You'd fall all the way into the sea. I don't know how to tell him that he's wrong. He knows I got close to it, closer than most people have, but he doesn't know that I was there. I was there, and I watched my friends be swallowed. People think it just wants to drown those who it takes. There's not many people who have gotten as close to it as I have, and even fewer who have watched the things that I've seen. I wish that all it wanted to do was drown me. A clean death, compared to what it really wants. People have gone out to try and film it, capture it, bomb it. They don't come back. It makes me feel better to monitor it, I say finally. I like knowing where it is. Okay, he says finally. Just come home soon. It's the first night tonight. Okay, is all I can say. I'll be back soon. I finally got back to my car. I set my cane on the empty passenger seat and pull out. Home's a lot more empty than it used to be when I was a kid. Downtown is full of dilapidated buildings and empty windows with signs advertising leases in them. There are walls where you can still see where the letters were pried off from the sign, discolored shapes from the sun. Other signs are bleached with sun and wind till you can hardly see what used to be there. Years on, I can't quite remember. Was that an ice cream store or a seafood restaurant? Was that a bookstore or an art studio? There are more homeless folks than there used to be as well. I see people sleeping under overhangs or beneath bridges. There are more encampments than there used to be as well. I pass one as I drive down the road back to my house. This one has been there for long enough that they found some fencing from somewhere to encircle their tents with. There are a few gaps in the barrier, presumably for fleeing at speed if they need to. There's already someone outside, a tall woman with skin darker than mine and a bright pink shirt. She catches my eye as I drive by, but doesn't try to interact with me. It still makes a distressed twist go through my stomach. It's not safe to be homeless here these days. I guess I don't know if it ever was. I wonder as I drive if she's going to survive the night. It's night one, which means that everyone's in danger, but especially someone without a house, without doors to lock and hide behind. The city's done their own rituals since about year 2, when it became obvious that this was going to happen and keep happening unless someone did something about it. I don't know all the details behind it. As I've heard it, they got someone from the university, marine biologists, oceanographers, folklorists, even some sailors from the local historical tall ship, and threw everyone in a room together until someone came up with an idea for what to do about the ferry boat. They do the ritual 3 times a year. 3s are important or something. It's a big ceremony for the town. They have hot dog vendors and everything. My father goes sometimes, but I don't. I'm pretty sure it doesn't do anything. Whatever I saw down there in the deep dark, down below, doesn't care about little rituals with salt and gorse and sea campion. And then there's the rituals that other people do. Don't be surprised that someone came up with it. Wouldn't it have occurred to you at least? It takes people. It hollows them out of everything but salt water and shadow and dries them down to the darkness beneath. It wants people, for whatever reason. I have no idea why. I don't know who it was who first thought of it, but it's the kind of thing that people do. It wants people. Let's give them the people we don't want in the first place. I don't know anyone who for sure has taken part in the unofficial side of Night 1. I've never heard of anyone getting convicted for it either. Once you fall into the cracks, people don't put that much energy into looking for you and bringing you justice either. Perhaps you think I should help them. Perhaps I should. What would you do? My house is small. We downsized after my mother was lost. I don't think either of us could bear existing in the rooms where she had once walked anymore. It's small and green, and after I park, I walk past my father's tiny vegetable garden. Tiny, still green tomatoes curl up steel wires towards the slowly fading sun. My father's sitting in the living room as I enter and lock the door behind me. Father has a charm hanging up by the door. I eye the little bundle of sticks and dried mallow and sea aster. I don't say anything. "Hey, sweet pea," he says. His eyes are hollow, but the ordinary hollow of exhaustion. My father hates Night 1. I think I do, somewhere, but I haven't felt anything very strongly for a long time. "Hey, Dad." I lean over and press a kiss to the top of his forehead. "Staying up?" "I've got all the windows and doors locked and warded," he says for answer, "but you should go double check for me." My legs ache. I want nothing more than to sit. I go check anyway. Like it has been every time for nearly a decade, it's perfect. When I go back, I sit down on the couch next to him. Like I'm a child again, I curl into his side. Dad wraps an arm around me the way he always does. His skin is cooler than it used to be, but it's the ordinary cool of age. I still compare everything to Sparrow. I don't know if I'll ever stop. He's watching the newscast from the ceremony. I lean my head against his shoulder. Watching it again? He sighs. I don't know what I think I'm gonna see. I shrug. Do you think it does anything? Sure, I say. Maybe. He accepts this answer and ruffles my hair gently before rising. I know he's gonna triple check. Some nights he ends up quadruple and quintuple checking again and again until I make him some tea and make him sit down. He's a lot quieter than he is in my memories. The sea ate his smiles as well. The sea ate the heart out of the city, I think, and sigh. And then pick up the remote and turn off the news. It's not until that night, when I'm laying in bed, that I let myself think what I really think the answer is. I don't think any of the rituals that we do work. Sometimes I meet people who think the violence that's done at the shoreline to those no one in the city cares about is worth it if it keeps the sharks away from their door. I don't know how to tell them that I'm pretty sure it can't do anything. I have charms in my room as well. I've had them for years. If it makes Dad feel better to make them. There are bundles and bundles lining the walls and shelves of my room. Bundles of rowan and aster and gorse and sea campion and seaweed. Dad trying different things over the years, trying to find something that works. I have years worth of them, and not one of them has ever stopped me from feeling their eyes that are not eyes on me. I can feel them now, as I lay in bed and there's nothing else to distract me. They're watching me still, behind the walls and sideways of the sea. I feel their gaze like a thin line that stretches from my bedroom all the miles away to where the ferry boat moves slowly, day by day, closer. I wonder if Sparrow and Ryan and Malay can see me, wherever they are. I wish I could believe that the rituals people do work. I wish I couldn't say this about myself, but I know that if it worked, I'd probably be okay with giving people to the sea. But I lay there in bed, and I feel it. I feel the same sense of pageantry in theater that I did that summer 10 years ago. The sense that everything we've built is nothing but paint and foil and cardboard. It's a play that we do because it makes us feel better, nothing more. Whatever I saw in the darkness that night isn't something that cares about salt water and flowers. If it's giving us space, giving us time to rest and recover, it's not because of anything that we're doing. It's because it wants to. It knows that there's so many of us that can't leave. It knows that even if 1 year's pickings are slim, that it has time. Whatever has waited out there for uncounted eons beneath the waves isn't something that needs to worry about time. I close my eyes, trying to ignore the sense of eyes on me. It can wait. I can think to myself. It can wait as long as it takes to catch someone who wants it. I wish I knew what to do. Perhaps somewhere else I'd be able to figure out how to get my friends back, how to drive the boat away forever, how to stop feeling the aching absence within my chest that I know is the space that they've prepared for me, still waiting for me to fill it. I don't. All I know how to do is lay in my bed and close my eyes, knowing that when I sleep, I will once again see the yawning gaze of the eyes beneath the sea. That last sentence sent shivers down my spine. Oh my gosh. Let me know if any of you guys had the same thought, but throughout reading this story and after getting to the end, it kept leaving me thinking about addiction. Like they saw this thing in the ocean that was an eye but wasn't an eye, and they were so drawn towards it. And the OP's trying to tell their friends that it's not a good thing, but the person who sees it, as soon as they see it for the first time, they're so incredibly drawn to it. And the OP lays in bed at night thinking about this thing that's always there and always watching. I don't know, it really sounds like it to me. I'm not sure if that's what the author was trying to portray, but if that's what they were going for, they did a damn good job of it. The next story's from r/no-sleep from user More Tanks. I went shopping at Walmart at 10:06 p.m. The store wouldn't let me leave. That sounds absolutely terrifying. That's the last place I'd want to be stuck, is a Walmart. Like, maybe like a Target would be cool, or Costco. It was 10:06 p.m. when I walked into the store. The massive Walmart was already echoing with emptiness, just like the parking lot outside. That was perfect for me. I hated coming earlier. During the day, it was packed wall to wall with people, so this became my shopping time. The store didn't close for another 2 hours, which was more than enough for me. I pushed my cart slowly through the empty aisles, avoiding the few other late-night shoppers who were wandering around like I was. I hadn't picked up much yet. I was crouched in front of the Pop-Tarts, trying to decide between strawberry and blueberry, when someone rammed into the cart beside me. The heavy metal cart slammed into my shoulder. I jumped up, already irritated, wondering what kind of asshole manages to run into someone in an almost empty store. "Can't you see I'm standing here?" I snapped. There was a woman standing next to my cart. She was wearing a torn bathrobe, barefoot. Her tangled grayish-black hair hung down over her shoulders. Her eyes were cloudy, pale gray, unfocused. "Help me," the strange woman said, staring straight at me. I was so stunned I couldn't say a word. What was this ragged, homeless-looking blind woman doing here? How had I not noticed her walking up to me? And more importantly, how did she find me? I stammered. "Are you okay, ma'am?" "Help," she said again. "Help me. I need to get out of here." She stepped closer, her hands reaching out, searching for me, or for anything she could grab onto to orient herself. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked, backing up a step. "I need to get out," she said, her voice rising as her hands started flailing more desperately. I didn't know what to do. I scanned the aisles for anyone, another shopper, an employee, anyone at all. There was no one, not a single person beside us. Okay, calm down," I said, trying to steady myself too. "Let's find someone who can help." I reached out carefully, telling her to stop swinging her arms. But the moment my fingertips brushed her arm, she moved, fast. Way too fast for someone who was supposed to be blind. She grabbed my wrist. I froze. I couldn't even make a sound. I just stared in shock as she tightened her grip on my forearm and dug her long, filthy nails deep into my flesh. "Ah, what the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled, Let go, let go. I shoved her hard with my free hand. She barely reacted. She staggered back a step, but she didn't fall. I ripped my arm free and stumbled away, staring in horror at the blood already seeping from the scratches. You're going to leave me here too, she screamed like a lunatic. You're going to leave me here too, Jonathan. I clenched my arm, blood slowly dripping between my fingers, and she smiled. Like she already knew the panic was crawling deeper and deeper into my bones. What did you say? I backed away from the crazy woman. How do you know my name? Ha, she laughed. You won't leave me here, right? We can go out together, right? What the hell are you talking about? I said, my voice shaking. Jonathan, she grinned, her teeth dark and rotting. Don't leave me here. Help me. I kept stepping backward, but there was no sign of blindness in her anymore. Her eyes were still cloudy gray, still cataract fogged, yet I could see it. She knew exactly where I was. She knew what to follow. I was still clutching the bleeding scratches on my arm. A single drop of blood hit the worn gray tile floor. Jonathan, why are you trying to leave me? She asked, still smiling as she inched closer. I backed up farther and farther until I hit the next shelf. My back pressed into rows of blue and white packaged products. What do you want from me? I shouted. Leave me alone. Somebody help. I whipped my head left and right down the endless aisles. The store was dead. It was like there was no one left in the building but the two of us. She walked toward me slowly. I had nowhere else to go. So I bolted, like a startled deer. I shot forward and ran. I clutched my arm and sprinted as fast as my legs would carry me, straight ahead, toward where the exit should have been. My sneakers pounded against the polished floor of the empty Walmart. I ran, gasping for air. Something wasn't right. I should have been outside by now, starting my car. But the shelves didn't end. The aisles didn't thin out. They stretched on and on, endless. The glowing exit sign shimmered in the distance, but it looked farther away than before, like the store itself was stretching. What the hell? I panted. What is this? Cereal boxes, canned goods, soda bottles, all lined up perfectly on the shelves, running on forever. I glanced back and she was gone. Just long, endless rows of merchandise stacked to the ceiling. Hello? I shouted into the empty store. Someone help me. My voice echoed through the massive space. When it faded, it was replaced by the low hum of fluorescent lights, the ticking of cooling pipes, and something else. A cold, sharp slapping sound, like bare feet running on tile. I spun in a circle, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Where was she? There was nothing. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. My mouth was dry. I was still gasping. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. No, this isn't possible. Maybe I ran the wrong way. I can't get lost in a store I've been shopping at for years. Where is everyone? Where are the workers? The barefoot slapping echoed again. Louder now. Closer. I swallowed hard, the sound of it filling my skull. I need to get the hell out of here. I turned and ran the other direction, maybe back the way I came. I ran like a spooked workhorse. But the shelves didn't thin out. The store didn't end. The fully stocked aisles stood in perfect, uniform rows, one after another. The products changed from section to section, but it felt like I kept passing the same shelves over and over again. I finally stopped between the canned vegetables and the bread, bent over and gasping for air. The hypermarket's bright packaging formed a blinding rainbow of color, motionless, watching. When I managed to straighten up and catch my breath, I noticed a well-dressed man in a tailored suit calmly examining jars of pickles. My mind practically cried out in relief. There was someone else here, someone besides me and that crazy woman. "Sir," I shouted, already rushing toward him. The middle-aged man with glasses flinched at my sudden yell and looked around for who had called out to him. An empty shopping basket hung from his right hand. He stared at me in confusion. "Sir, please, you have to help me," I said as soon as I reached him. "Some insane woman attacked me. She's lurking somewhere in the store. This whole thing is insane." The older man looked at me suspiciously, like I was a lunatic. And yeah, I sounded like one. I need to get out of here, I continued, rambling, ignoring his loaded stare. I can't even find the exit. It's like the store doesn't end. Excuse me, let me interrupt you, the man said in a measured tone. I actually need a bit of assistance. In this jar of pickles, how many whole cucumbers are inside? I just froze. What the hell is this? I was terrified that woman would find me again. I couldn't get out of the store, and this asshole wants to discuss pickles? This guy's got the right idea. Are you deaf? Didn't you just hear what I said? I snapped at him. Can't you see my arm? I'm bleeding. Now excuse me. The elegant gentleman leaned closer, but instead of looking at my injuries, he stared at my chest. Frank, forgive me, but how can you speak to a customer like that while you're on the clock? I just stood there, staring at him blankly. Frank? What the hell was he talking about? Why are you so shocked? The older man asked smugly, pointing at my chest. You work here, don't you? I looked down, and he was right. A blue Walmart vest hung on my shoulders. A cheap plastic name tag clipped to it read, Frank. What the hell? I whispered, staring at myself in horror. When did this get on me? Why would I be Frank? This isn't possible. What is happening here? What is this? I asked, looking back at him. But the man was already at the end of the aisle. I hadn't even noticed him leave. I hadn't heard him move. He walked like any ordinary shopper, browsing the shelves, searching for something mundane. Then he turned left at the end of the aisle. Sir, wait, I shouted, hurrying after him. Please wait, help me. I reached the end of the aisle, ripping the stupid blue vest off as I ran. But when I stepped out into the wide main walkway, the man was gone, like the floor had swallowed him whole. I threw the vest to the ground in frustration. And that's when I saw her, standing farther down the corridor, the woman. She was grinning at me with those gray, lifeless eyes. She wasn't rushing. She was just waiting, like she knew I had nowhere left to go. After a few seconds of staring at me, she suddenly darted between the shelves and vanished into the aisles. This thing is still following me. I figured it was smarter to run. I didn't know where the woman was or what she wanted, but I didn't want to run into her again. So whatever direction she might have gone, if it even led anywhere, I headed the opposite way. The aisles didn't change. The floor thudded beneath my steps the same way. The fluorescent lights kept flickering and humming overhead. I had just stopped to glance back and see if she was following when the intercom chime rang out loudly. Frank, a calm female voice said over the speakers. Please come to register 3. I repeat, Frank, come to register 3. Who the hell is Frank? Why was I wearing his vest? What is this place? The intercom gave a melodic beep and fell silent. I had no idea what to do. I didn't even know how long I'd been wandering these aisles. Since I was standing next to a fully stocked wall of soda, I stepped into the aisle and grabbed a can of Dr. Pepper. I took a long drink, walking toward the other end of the aisle. When I reached the end, the exact same sign greeted me. I turned to head off in some direction, any direction. Then I froze. She was standing there again, this time barely an aisle away. She wasn't smiling. It felt like I'd been caught by an employee for stealing merchandise. I snapped back to my senses, tossed the soda aside, and bolted into the aisles. I ran past the soda racks, cutting across toward the opposite row, but something wasn't right. The moment I cleared the end of the aisle, she was there again. Same angry expression. I stopped dead and glanced back the way I'd come. The mad woman charged me. I had just enough presence of mind to spin and run back. I knocked over a crate of Mountain Dew, sending bottles clattering across the floor. It didn't slow her down. She sprinted after me, her bare feet slapping loudly against the cold tile. I made it into one of the cleaning supplies aisles when she caught up. I felt her claws rake into my back, shoving me forward. I crashed into a stack of Clorox bottles, sending them crashing off the shelves and hit the floor beside them. I barely managed to roll over before she was on top of me. She straddled me and started hitting, clawing, striking like a rabid animal. I threw my arms up to block the blows, but she was relentless. Her cold hands rained down on my arms and head so fast I started to feel dizzy. Then, in a split second of distraction, she dragged her nails across the right side of my face. I felt her filthy claws carve into my forehead and rake down across my cheek. I screamed. Like a maddened bull, I bucked and threw her off. She crashed backward, and for a second, I was free. I scrambled to my feet and tried to run, to escape anywhere, but she grabbed my leg. Her nails felt sharper than before as she drove them into my calf. I howled. In a surge of rage, I stepped back and kicked her square in the face. She let go instantly. I was free. Limping, I hurried toward the end of the cleaning aisle. I risked one glance back to see if she was following. The gaunt, filthy woman was sitting on the floor. Her matted hair hung over her face. But I could see her watching me as I stumbled away, and she was grinning. Those gray eyes locked onto me, like she had finally gotten her revenge. I kept limping through the aisles. I didn't know where I was going anymore, but I was terrified of that woman. I could feel the hatred inside her, the need to kill me, and at the same time, the twisted contradiction. She wanted me here, and didn't want me here. What is this place? What does it want from me? I had to find an exit. Wherever it was in this maze, I had to get out before she found me again. But the last attack had been strange. I ran from her, and she still got closer. It was like I wasn't running away at all, like I was running straight toward her. Maybe I shouldn't even be thinking about that. Maybe I should just focus on getting out, on surviving. I had to get out. I staggered out from between the shelves, leaving droplets of blood behind me like a trail. I was back on the massive main aisle again. Nothing had changed. Shelves stretched as far as I could see. My bag, the thought hit me like lightning. I had a bag. I left it in my shopping cart when I came in. My phone, my wallet, my car keys, everything was in there. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't give up. My body was still shaking, pain pulsing through me, and I didn't even know what kept pushing me forward anymore. And for the first time in this nightmare maze, I felt like luck had finally smiled at me. I was standing in the over-the-counter medicine section. The shelves were lined with exactly what I needed to treat my injuries. I limped into the aisle, dragging my bleeding leg behind me. I grabbed everything I could. I won't pretend I did it properly, but I treated myself as best I could. When I finished, I couldn't go any further. I slid down to the floor, leaning my back against the shelf, and just stared into nothing. Gauze wrappers and empty boxes were scattered around me. The supermarket hummed quietly. The lights flickered occasionally. The air conditioning rattled overhead. I fought to keep my eyes open. Why did you eat so much? A thin little voice snapped, jolting me upright. Dad's gonna yell at us. Leave me alone, a little boy muttered with his mouth full. I didn't see anyone at first. I had no idea where the voices were coming from or who they belonged to. Mom got really, really mad, a little girl's voice said. We're definitely gonna get in trouble. I forced myself to stand, hissing in pain. I had to find them. Maybe they were near the exit. I didn't have to go far. I didn't even understand this store layout anymore. When I stepped into the aisle, the two kids fell silent and stared at me. One of them was a red-haired, freckled, chubby boy sitting on the floor. Candy wrappers were scattered all around him, a ridiculous amount. A few feet away stood a girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a purple floral summer dress. She clutched a long-eared bunny plush in her small hands and stared at the floor guiltily. My stomach, the red-hair boy whimpered. Chocolate smeared around his mouth when he noticed me. Hi, I said, confused. How did you get here? What are you doing? I'm sorry, the blonde girl said, squeezing her bunny tighter. I told him not to eat that much. Snitch, the boy snapped and tried to toss an empty Reese's wrapper at her. Hey, calm down, I said, limping closer and crouching beside them. Enough. Tell me what happened. How did you get here? We came here with you, Dad, looking at me like I was the one being strange. For a second, it felt like ice water poured down my back. Dad, I don't have kids. I don't even have a wife. How could I have kids? You're not my children, I blurted out, almost offended. That's not possible. The two kids looked at each other, confused. I could see on their faces that they didn't understand what I was saying. They really thought I was their father, that I wasn't Jonathan. I don't understand, I muttered, rubbing my face. Something pressed against the cut on my hand. I looked down. There was a ring on my finger, a wedding ring. Am I married? No, that's impossible. I'm Jonathan, 27, single, and I do not work at a supermarket. My stomach tightened, and I was one breath away from hyperventilating. Who are these kids? Why are they calling me dad? And why am I wearing a ring? I stood up and stepped away from them, pulling the ring off my finger. Beneath it, there was a pale mark in my skin, the kind you only get after wearing a ring for years. But this still wasn't me. I know my name. They don't get to take that from me. They don't get to take my life. Dad? The little girl asked softly. Are we going home now? This place is boring. Yeah, sure, I answered automatically, and I don't even know why. Just tell me one more thing, okay? Have you seen a lady around here? An ugly lady? The girl shook her head, her thin blonde hair swaying. The red-haired boy was still sprawled on the floor, but he shook his head too. Nope, didn't see anyone. Okay, I said, forcing calm into my voice. Then, to my surprise, the girl gently took my hand. Her small, warm fingers wrapped around mine. It felt peaceful, like a quiet weekend morning. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just breathed. Can you help me too? The boy asked from the floor. He reached out his chubby little hand so I could pull him up from the pile of candy wrappers. I grabbed his sticky, sugary, chocolate-smeared hand and helped him to his feet. Do you know where the exit is? I asked once he was standing. Maybe the door? The girl shrugged innocently. My stomach, the boy groaned, bending slightly. The girl rolled her eyes at him, her cheerful little face flushed pink. All right, let's go find that door, I said, trying to sound steady. We walked between the tall shelves together. The aisles repeated themselves endlessly as we moved forward. I didn't let go of their hands. I'm not even sure why. Maybe because, even in this hell, I needed something human to hold on to. Ooh, toys, the girl suddenly squealed, ripping her hand free from mine and sprinting off. No, I shouted, reaching after her. Too late. The moment she spotted rows of Lego sets, Barbies, and bright, colorful boxes stacked high, her little legs carried her straight toward them. I tried to run after her, but my injured leg dragged painfully behind me. And as if that wasn't enough, the chubby boy was still clinging to my other hand. My stomach really hurts, he whined as I tried to move faster. It hurts so bad. Come on, I snapped. Move. As if he did it on purpose, he suddenly went limp and collapsed on the floor. He curled into himself, groaning, clutching his stomach. I stood there, my head whipping back and forth. The girl was already barely visible between the aisles, browsing plush toys. The boy was writhing in pain on the floor. I couldn't let them disappear. I hissed through the pain and lifted the boy up. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, but he had to weigh at least 90 pounds. I wrapped my arms around him, hoisted him against my chest, his head resting on my shoulder, and limped toward the toy section. Hey, I shouted. Come back, where are you? I moved between rows of Barbies and action figures carrying the boy, but the girl was gone. Hello? I yelled again. Where are you? The answer didn't come from her. It came as a loud belch, followed immediately by the wet, choking sound of vomiting. The boy threw up, all over my neck. The thick, brown, syrupy mess soaked through my shirt and slid under the fabric. Jesus, I muttered, disgusted, lowering him to the floor and propping him against the shelf. He sat there, half asleep, his mouth smeared with vomit, clutching his round little belly. I was shaking again. Panic and confusion clawed their way back into me. These kids can't get lost here. I have to get them out. I don't know why. Ariel! The girl's voice squealed happily from somewhere nearby. I snapped my head up. She had to be close. The voice sounded just a few aisles over. Stay here, buddy. I crouched down beside the boy. I'll come back for you, okay? He mumbled something unintelligible, chocolate and vomit still smeared across his lips. Here, wipe your mouth with this, I said, grabbing a large lion plush from the shelf and handing it to him. I promise I'll come back. Then I turned and limped toward the confirmed direction of the voice. I shouted until my throat burned raw. I wandered in circles until fresh blood seeped through my bandages again, but I found no one. I didn't hear the girl again, and when I went back to where I thought I'd left the boy, he was gone too. The same plush toys were on the shelf, the same yellow lion, but the boy wasn't there. The shelves never changed. No matter which direction I turned, the aisles looked like copies of each other. My legs throbbed. I didn't even have the strength to shout anymore. I turned into a Lego aisle, barely aware of myself, drifting between the shelves. That's when I saw something lying on the floor. My pulse spiked. I rushed toward it, a plush toy, a long-eared rabbit. I recognized it immediately, but there was still no sign of either of them. I lost them. It felt like I was watching myself from the outside. I shuffled between the aisles like a shadow. I'd left the toy section long ago, left the little girl's bunny there too. And once again, I was walking down the endless main aisle, forward and forward. I had no idea where I was going. The rabbit was still in my hand. Maybe I could give it back. The supermarket was silent. The whole place hummed and clicked softly. There was no one here but me, not a single soul. Sometimes I'd jerk my head up in fear or cautiously peer down an aisle when I heard something unfamiliar. But the woman was nowhere, neither were the kids. I was like a wanderer, the wanderer of the supermarket. The aisles were the same and somehow different. There was no pattern to what came after that. They just kept coming. Sometimes I stopped to eat something or drink when I had to. When I passed the pharmacy section again, I rewrapped my wounds. I even changed my clothes so I wouldn't carry the stench of vomit with me everywhere. I was starting to believe I would spend the rest of my life in there. Then, when the aisles turned back into canned goods and groceries, I saw someone standing between the shelves. A blonde woman. She was sorting through canned tomatoes. Her long hair fell softly over her shoulders, emerald green eyes studying the label in her hand. She was young and beautiful. As if she felt me staring from the end of the aisle. She looked up. Her eyes were slightly stern at first. Then, as if she'd just spotted her favorite person in the world, she smiled and waved. I didn't understand what she wanted. I just stood there like a ship dropped anchor, watching the cheerful blonde beauty waving at me. Just a heads up, guys, the text here on this Reddit post, if you want to go look at it, link in the description, it's in another language, and I don't even know. I started walking toward her. I still didn't understand what she was saying, but something pulled me toward her. She pushed the can toward me. I stared blankly at her full lips and small, delicate nose. I don't understand what you want, I said in a dull voice, barely recognizing my own. I don't know, I muttered, looking down at the container. I don't know what you want. Something was off. It wasn't a can. It was a glass jar. She handed me whole tomatoes floating in yellowish brine. The label was blue-purple, decorated with tomatoes. Did you even look at it? The blonde woman asked, annoyed. Hello? I watched her reddish lips form the words. The sounds were foreign, completely alien to me. And yet, I understood them. Not like gibberish anymore. How? I stared at her. How can I understand you? The fluorescent lights began to flicker, almost all of them at once, like a split-second power outage. For a millisecond, I saw a different store. Smaller, grayer. The products less colorful, fewer in variety, but somehow warmer. Then it was gone, like it had never been there. Artem, sweetheart, what's wrong with you? She asked, looking at me with growing concern, like I was the strange one. I didn't know how to respond. Should I panic? Should I break down? Instead, only one sentence came to mind. How do I get out of here? Get out from where? The woman asked, her tone almost motherly in its sternness. Artem, I swear to God, if you've started drinking again, I'll beat you so bad you won't forget it. The pretty woman wagged her finger at me like I was some misbehaving little boy. I didn't have the strength to argue with her. Come on, she said, looping her arm through mine. I still want to look around. And she started pulling me with her.
For someone so short and slender, she was surprisingly strong. Strong enough to almost drag me along. She stood close, her arm brushing against my side as she held on to me. Her perfume smelled like peach blossoms, strong but not sickly. We walked slowly but steadily. I didn't say a word. I just let myself drift with the moment. She didn't speak either, only smiled at me now and then with her big green eyes. Then, suddenly, the store intercom crackled. The familiar chime played. "Jonathan," a voice said over the speakers. My voice? "Don't go deeper. You won't find the exit that way." I stopped dead in my tracks, pulling the woman back with me. She would have kept walking as if nothing had happened. When I refused to move, the blonde woman looked at me questioningly. "What is it, Artem?" she asked, staring deep into my eyes. Without thinking, I grabbed both of her arms. I looked straight into her eyes, those green jewels shining up at me. I studied her smooth, feminine features. She glanced away, suddenly flustered, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "I'm sorry, but I can't go with you," I said, as if I'd just had a revelation. "This isn't the way I'm supposed to go." I saw the romantic softness drain from her almost instantly. She looked at me in confusion, like she hadn't heard a single word from the intercom. "Artem, what are you talking about?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. This wasn't Jonathan speaking. It was like I'd become someone else for that moment, someone with different feelings. I leaned in and kissed her, long and slow. The moment felt frozen in time, like it belonged to a turning point in someone's life. Not Jonathan's life, but someone else's. And in that stretched out kiss, I felt her soft, slender arms fade from between my fingers, her gentle lips dissolve, the peach-scented perfume growing weaker, the warmth of her body disappearing from beside me. And suddenly, I no longer recognized that beautiful, blonde, green-eyed woman at all. I was standing alone between the supermarket aisles. The shelves continued into infinity. I rubbed my fingers against my palm, as if searching for the memory of her soft touch. After a few lingering seconds, I started walking between the aisles again. But this time, I had a purpose. I kept wandering through the endlessly repeating aisles. In my hand, I gripped the pipe wrench I'd taken from the hardware section. I had to find the crazy woman. I saw it as my only chance to get out. I drifted between the rows, moving left, then right, scanning every corner. The end of every aisle, but the woman refused to show herself, as if she were deliberately hiding. Where was she? Did she know what I was planning? I grew more and more irritated, angry and frustrated. Then, in a weaker moment, when I turned into yet another empty aisle filled with chips, something inside me snapped. I grabbed the wrench and started smashing everything within reach. Bags of chips burst apart, their colorful packaging ripping open as seasoned potato chips spilled everywhere. I stomped over them, swinging the wrench wildly in my hand. Panting, I dropped to my knees and stared at the destruction around me. The only victims were the chips. Silence fell. Only the hum of the ventilation system and the clicking of the fluorescent lights echoed through the store. I lifted my exhausted head, and she was standing at the end of the aisle. She just stood there, grinning, watching me unravel. How long had she been standing there? "Get over here," I screamed at her. "Screw you, I'm gonna smash your skull in." I jumped to my feet and charged at her with the wrench in my hand, but she didn't attack. She ran. And I chased her like an animal. No matter how fast I went, by the time I reached the long main corridor, she was gone. "Where are you?" I roared into the endless space. She laughed. I heard the insane, bony, blind woman laughing at me. She peeked out from behind one of the aisles. Only her head was visible. I didn't care. I threw myself after her. Nothing else mattered anymore. From that moment on, I was caught in the spiral. I don't know how long we played that game, and I don't know why I stopped thinking. Wherever the woman appeared, she would just stand at the end of an aisle, staring at me, almost mockingly, as if she were teasing me. And I, like a lunatic, charged after her with the pipe wrench in my hand. I wanted to catch her. I wanted to smash her face in, for everything, for keeping me here. I was sure she was the one trapping me. I could feel it. This was all because of her. As I ran into the baking supplies aisle, probably from exhaustion or because I was completely losing it, I tripped over my own feet. I crashed hard onto the gray stone tiles, cursing. I rolled onto my back so I wouldn't press my face into the filthy floor. And I stayed there, staring up at the harsh yellow glow of the fluorescent lights above me. Soft footsteps approached, and in an instant, the mad woman was standing over me. Long, filthy toenails curled from her feet, which looked caked in dirt. Her thin robe hung down to her ankles. "Jonathan?" she mocked. "We're not playing anymore? I was having so much fun." "Shut the hell up," I snapped, lying on the floor. I didn't jump up right away. As hard as it was to restrain myself, I had to look calm. This was my best chance. I couldn't waste it. "Jonathan, don't be silly," she cooed sweetly, mocking me. "Come on, catch me." I felt the pipe wrench beside my hand. It would only take one movement. I grabbed it, and sitting up, swung with everything I had. She jumped, but either she didn't expect it or she didn't plan for it. I smashed her knee so hard, she screamed and collapsed. I sprang to my feet and brought the wrench down again on her leg. Blood burst from the broken limb, splattering across the gray floor in tiny red droplets, trophies of my victory. "Let me go," I shouted, striking her thigh again. She tried to shield herself with her hands, but when I swung the heavy wrench, her thin wrist cracked loudly. She shrieked and crumpled, writhing across the floor like a worm. I stood over her, eyes wild, clutching the wrench like a madman. How strange. It felt like we had switched places. "Oh my God, what are you doing, Frank?" a voice said behind me. It was familiar. I'd heard that man before. Where? When? And who the hell was Frank? The elegant gentleman's voice flashed into my mind. The one I'd met earlier. How was he here again? I spun around quickly, maybe to explain myself, or maybe to smash his skull too if he stood in my way, but there was no one behind me. Only a long aisle stacked with sweets. Candy, chocolate, sugar. Wait, this wasn't even the aisle where I'd fallen. This wasn't where I was. I turned back to the woman, but she was gone. Instead, two children were standing there, trembling. A chubby red-haired boy shielding a small blonde girl with his body. Tears and snot streaked their faces. Their eyes were red from crying as they stared at me in terror. "Dad," the little girl whispered. "Why are you doing this?" I staggered backward. With my torn, bloody hand, I rubbed my face, trying to wake up, to snap out of it. "Dad," she asked again. "Enough," I screamed. "Enough. I'm not your father. I just want to get out." I started swinging the wrench wildly, like a man possessed, hitting everything within reach. The children, too, but I didn't hit them. The heavy metal tool passed straight through their bodies, blurring their shapes as if they were mirages. The lights began to flicker. Light, darkness, light, darkness. I kept thrashing with the wrench, striking at everything. A soft female voice pled. The lights stopped flickering. The place shifted into a small, gray store filled with strange, unfamiliar products. "Leave me alone," I shouted. "Artem, why?" the woman sobbed. And then I saw her. The blonde beauty lay before me. She tried to shield her face with her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. A dark purple bruise disfigured her pale skin. Blood trickled from her nose. She looked up at me, pleading. I was gasping from my exhausted frenzy when I realized my arm was raised. The heavy wrench hung in the air, aimed at the woman on the floor. 1 second, and I would bring it down. "You're not real," I screamed and swung. The wrench passed through her body, dissolving her like a fragile porcelain veil, and then it slammed into the stone floor, cracking it open. There was something beneath the cold stone, something endless, something pulsing, something calling to me. I struck the floor again and again. The stone split further until a large section broke loose. I knelt, slid my hand underneath, and lifted the slab. Beneath it, there was nothing but endless darkness. The abyss was beneath me. At the opening in the cold gray stone floor, a hole filled with complete emptiness, yet it didn't feel empty at all. I picked up a chunk of broken stone and tossed it in. I didn't hear it hit the bottom. If anything, it was as if it simply dissolved into the void. I just stared out into the darkness. Was this my way out, or was I about to sink even deeper into whatever this was? Slowly, I extended my index finger and reached into the dark. Something grabbed me. Maybe a hand, maybe something else, I couldn't tell. All I felt was a violent pull. There was nothing to hold on to. It happened in a fraction of a second, and the darkness swallowed me. Do you know what it feels like to float on water? Eyes closed, head tilted back, staring at the sky, feeling almost weightless as the waves carry you. That was the darkness. It was as if I were floating between waves in a pitch-black ocean where nothing else existed. For a while, I could still see the glowing opening above me, the hole I had smashed through the floor, but the dark waves slowly closed over it, hiding the light. The suffocating black pressed in around me. I thrashed and kicked at nothing, trying to swim in a pool that didn't exist, until suddenly, with a heavy thud, I hit the ground. It didn't hurt. I didn't injure anything. It was as if something had simply set me down. I couldn't see a thing. I didn't even know where I was. I lay there in the dark on a cold, smooth surface. When I felt around, my fingers traced straight, polished lines like marble tiles. I stood up. At least it felt like I did. With my hands stretched out in front of me, I searched for something, anything to grab onto. But there was nothing, just empty space. "Hello?" I called into the darkness. Only my echo answered me. It felt like I was trapped inside an empty room. I started shuffling forward, at least I think it was forward. I didn't dare lift my feet. I didn't even know which direction I was moving. I shuffled for what felt like forever. After a while, I dared to take small steps, careful ones. I walked somewhere, maybe in circles, maybe in a straight line, I have no idea. As I moved carefully ahead, my soft, dragging footsteps echoing around me, I heard something else. A woman's voice. It was distorted, as if she were speaking from far away, or from the other side of a wall. Finally, I had something to follow. A voice. I tried to move toward it, and it seemed to grow louder, clearer. "Sweetheart, I told you no. Not that either. Please listen to what I'm saying." "Hello?" I called out again. "Is someone there?" As I stepped forward, I bumped into something solid. It rattled metallically, as if it had shifted slightly. "Shit," I hissed, rubbing my shoulder. I reached out with my hands to feel what it was. Cold, long surfaces. Shelves, at waist height. Things hanging from them. Plastic packaging? Food? "Wait, sweetheart," the woman said, then paused. "Excuse me, sir, are you okay?" Her voice sounded so close now, as if she were standing right in front of me, as if she were speaking directly to me. Maybe it wasn't the place that was dark. Something touched me. Soft, slender fingers. I flinched and swatted at it instinctively. My nerves were shot from everything that had happened. "Are you crazy?" the woman snapped angrily. "Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?" "I'm sorry," I said, not even sure which direction I was facing. "Please, help me." 10:06 p.m., and I was standing in the parking lot. Blinking, my vision cleared. I was one step away from pushing the shopping cart through the store's automatic sliding doors. I'm outside? I drew in a deep breath, like I was on the verge of a panic attack. I wanted to scream like a terrified child. My mind felt like a deep-sea diver who had surfaced too fast. Surfaced? But from where? I reached into the cart, pulled out my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and started walking toward the row of cars. One word, one image, one single moment. Was this reality, or just another department in the store? Guys, psychological horror, I think it's the thing that freaks me out the most. Would you guys call this a backrooms type experience, or was it something completely different? The next story is from r/no sleep from user Saturdead, and it's titled Fogmen.
My husband Chris and I moved to South Dakota the year our oldest son turned 6. It wasn't an easy decision. I had a career on the East Coast, but we both had family in the Midwest. It was also part of a promise we'd made to one another when we got married. We wanted to raise our kids with the kind of small town living that made the two of us who we were. Big cities are great for work, in studies and fun, but not so much for quiet Saturday nights and affordable housing.
We tried to hit the ground running. We'd saved up for a cheap house on a really nice street. Our neighbors were mostly old folks, so they were easy to impress. I just had to show up with the kiddos running laps around my legs, and I'd see face after face light up. It didn't take much for us to feel welcome. Chris had a cousin in town that introduced him to all kinds of friends. Before I knew it, he was off playing pool after work or going magnet fishing. I wasn't mad at him going out. He does his fair share of work around the house and with the kids. I think I was mostly frustrated about how easy he made friends. He just had to cheer for the Vikings and someone would hand him a beer. For me, it was a bit more complicated. I had a part-time job at the DMV, but people didn't really come there to socialize. Then I met Mallory. Mallory, or Mal, lived 4 houses down. I met her one day when I got home from work. She'd just rung the doorbell and wasn't expecting someone to pull up the driveway behind her. She was short, bit round, and had a braid that reached halfway down her back. She had this smile where she didn't just move her mouth, her entire face scrunched up. It's like she could smile with her whole body. "Hey neighbor," she called out, waving at me. "Heard some wild rumors about another mom moving in. I'm afraid it's all true." I shook her hand and she helped me with my groceries. She had 3 kids of her own and was a stay-at-home mom. Her husband worked at the local school, so there was a good chance he'd have to educate my boys someday. We ended up spending a lot of the day together talking about the neighborhood, our kids, and the careers we'd stepped away from. She'd worked in marketing for a brewery, mostly doing graphic design. She still did some as a work-from-home kind of deal, but it was mostly a side gig. She couldn't believe I had the time to hold down a proper job, but a lot of folks were struggling to make ends meet. Every bit helps. "I think the worst of it is the boredom," she confided in me. "I get bored out of my mind. The same walls, the same sounds, the same people. Sometimes I wish the old bag across the street, go belly up, just so I could go say hi to the folks coming to pick her up." "You're terrible," I laughed. "It's really that bad?" "Yes, by God, yes. Let this be a lesson. Get out of the house. A job, a hobby, a lover, whatever you gotta do. Don't let yourself get cabin fever." "I'm guessing grocery runs ain't doing it for you." "Are you kidding?" She laughed. "I space my shopping out so I can get a little every day. Whatever gets me to stretch my legs." No offense, but I hope I never get like that. Oh, I hope so too. Now, she offered me her hand and a sincere look. "Let's be best friends so I can live vicariously through you." Deal. We shook on it. We tried to keep a straight face, and neither of us let go until we burst out laughing. I'd finally made a friend. Mal and I got along surprisingly well. My oldest son was about the same age as her youngest, and the 2 of them became best friends overnight. Within a couple of weeks, we had shared family dinners, sleepovers, and water balloon fights in the backyard. I got to meet Mal's husband, Ollie. Nice enough fella. Not quite the kind of guy my Chris hangs out with, but pleasant enough to be around. A bit pretentious, perhaps. One night, the whole family was invited over. Mal and Ollie wanted to host a proper dinner party. They'd set up this huge projector screen in the living room with a bunch of party games for the kids. It was an instant hit. Mal made her own spaghetti and meatballs, fancy enough to raise an eyebrow, good enough to get the kids on board. While they played, Chris and Ollie spent some time in the yard, discussing God knows what. As Mal and I finally got a chance to talk, we settled down with a glass of wine. "You know, there are things going on around town," she mumbled. "You into true crime?" "I watched Making a Murderer," I said with an honest shrug. "Not really my thing." "What about scary stuff? Hauntings, possessions, ghost hunters?" "I mean, for a laugh, yeah. You don't believe it?" "I don't know," I said, giving her a wary smile. "I don't have time to think about that." "So you can honestly say you've never seen anything you can't explain?" "I mean, I both could and couldn't. We all have a couple of stories we can't make sense of. A shadow outside the window, a strange sound being carried by the wind, a sunflower that turned blue when you picked it up, a truck driving past with no one in the driver's seat." As the kids' sugar crashed and the house quieted into a whisper, Mal and I ended up in the yard finishing our 3rd glass of white wine, talking in hushed voices. Chris had taken our kids home to sleep, while Ollie was making sure the others were getting ready for bed. There's this one thing I keep hearing about, Mal mumbled. But it's not a joke. You can't think of it like that. Promise? Sure, yeah. It's the fog, she said, pointing at me knowingly. There's something dangerous in the fog. What, like Bigfoot? Not a joke, she said, poking me on the cheek. This isn't just me telling you. There really is something in the fog. What do you mean? The fog here gets so thick in the morning that sometimes people get lost. Mostly old folks or drunks, but sometimes people just disappear. That usually happens when you can't see anything. Alright, just do this one thing. Look up what happened on this street July 18th, 6 years ago. Google it. You'll see what I mean. I wasn't expecting to go home with homework that night, but Mal made me promise. I have to admit, it was a bit exciting. It felt like I was playing detective, getting to the bottom of some mystery swept under the rug. I figured that was sort of the point. Before I went to bed that night, I looked up the article. It was easy enough to find. There weren't many articles written about anything even remotely near the street. It was an article about a woman going missing on the morning of July 18th, at the height of a nasty fog coming in from the east. What surprised me was the missing person herself, a young woman in her early 20s who went that same route every morning. Not any of the old folks or some random drunk. She was a runner. There were no witnesses who'd seen her out and about that morning, but there were plenty who had seen and heard something else. One anonymous witness described, there was someone standing in that field, and they just kept screaming like their life depended on it. You think it was her, the missing woman? It was not a woman's voice, not a man's either. Not I don't know, sounded like the fog's voice. The article ended with a hand-drawn picture of what looked like a person walking through the fields with a trail of tendrils lagging behind. The text at the bottom read, Artist's Rendition. Over the next couple days, Mal and I texted back and forth about this. I kept asking her questions like who the missing person was and what people knew about what had happened. She was surprisingly honest about it. The main theory was that she'd been attacked by one of her exes. After all, a lot of people knew about her morning jog. It wouldn't be that hard to set up an ambush. Others weren't so sure. There'd been other instances where people had gone missing in the fog. There was one article about a car being left wide open on the road with no one in it. The driver was presumed missing and they'd opened a tip line for the public. Mal explained that she knew one of the guys working that tip line and more than one person had called in about, quote-unquote, a strange man in the fog. There were only a couple of articles spanning 10 years, but they were consistent. People going missing and witnesses talking about something moving in the fog. Mal explained that there were a couple of people from around town who kept an ear to the ground and shared interesting tips and sights. It was a sort of impromptu digital neighborhood watch, but with so little going on, they mostly devolved into sharing memes and rumors. I was invited. I wasn't sure about whether to accept it or not, but I must admit, I was curious, and they had a lot to say. There were about half a dozen people posting regularly. There was Mal, of course, and two retired women who lived on the other side of town. There was a younger girl who worked as a farmhand, and what looked like the town's only two openly gay men in their 50s. It didn't take long to find the post about the so-called fogmen. While there had only been a couple of articles, there were several rumors of the would-be fogmen. There were sightings, and by the looks of it, even a couple of pictures. Most of them were just pictures of foggy fields, but if you look closely enough, you could imagine seeing something out there. Little black bumps in the distance. Could be a bush, could be a person. They really do scream, one of the commenters had posted, but not like how people scream. It's something different. A couple of days later, when I had a moment to myself, I gave Mal a call. We ended up talking for well over an hour. At some point, we drifted in on the topic of the fogmen. Some people really believe in this stuff, don't they? I asked. Yeah, don't you? It's just stories and blurry pictures. Hard to believe in that. A lot of things are just stories and blurry pictures. Don't mean they don't happen. I mean, it's kinda spooky, but come on. Monsters in the fog? Not monsters, fogmen. Sure, that. Look, all I'm saying is, if you see something, say something. See something? Like what? Oh, come on, she laughed, exasperated. Just keep an eye out when the fog rolls in. It was early morning in late July when I saw the fog for the first time. I was on my way to work, but it was hard to see the road. The fog got so thick that I could barely see what was right in front of me. After almost missing a turn, I decided to slow to a crawl. There's this big field on the right-hand side when I drive to work. You can usually see for miles, but now I couldn't even see the edge of the road. Despite crawling along, I managed to dip the front wheel off the side, and something popped. I slammed my foot on the brake and went out to check. Yup, flat tire. Great. I didn't have a jack, so I couldn't fix the damn thing myself. I called Chris and asked him to come help me. He didn't mind. If anything, I think it boosted his ego a little. While I waited, I decided to humor Mel. I took out my phone and scanned the fog for anything that looked even remotely human, hoping I could get a pole or something at a good angle. While I didn't see anything, I got this weird sensation in my chest, like something growing cold inside me, a creeping pain reaching into my lungs. And as I looked up from my phone, I realized that while I wasn't seeing anything, I was definitely hearing something. Something in the field, making a kind of sound I had never heard before. Something raspy and shrill, like the vibrating echo of a distant groan. By the time Chris got there, the fog had cleared up. There was nothing in that field. If there had been, I would have seen it. As I said, it was empty for miles. I'd managed to record a video, but it didn't pick up on that sound. I sent it to Mal anyway, hoping she might be able to get something out of it. She didn't, but she was ecstatic about the prospect of me taking the infamous Fogman a little more seriously. And while I was, her enthusiasm was a bit off-putting. She had the energy of someone waiting for an adventure to drop in her lap, and I wasn't feeling it. What I'd heard out there wasn't an adventure. It was danger. I didn't like it. Despite that, Mal was happy to share what I'd sent her in our social media group. All of a sudden, my experience wasn't just a conversation between friends. It became an open forum. She shared the video and forwarded what I'd said. It was a bit of an overreach, but I wasn't about to get mad about it. She meant well, and she was just excited. That's a good problem to have. That's where they found the car, Farmhand wrote as a comment on my video. Anyone got Harriet's socials? She lives nearby. Maybe she saw something. Harriet is down in Florida to see her sister, someone responded. Won't see her for weeks. New girl, did you hear anything? Like, really hear it? They were waiting for my reply. I wrote one, edited, rewrote, and then just canceled the whole post. After a back and forth with myself, I took the bull by the horn. I had to be honest, not only with them, but myself. Yeah, I wrote. I definitely heard something. Over the next few days, I was glued to my phone. Whenever I had a moment to myself, I was talking to the Fog Watch, our unofficial group name. The more we talked, the more I recognized myself and what they were saying. The sound wasn't really a scream, but sort of reminded me of one. Something in the fog, only to disappear along with it. The big thing now was to see if anyone was missing. Someone always went missing when the fogmen rolled around. The following Friday night, as I was about to go to bed, I started getting notifications on my phone. When I read them, my hands started shaking. I rushed into the kitchen to show Chris, but he was barely paying attention. There was an old man missing. Last they'd seen him, he'd been parked outside a gas station, about a 10-minute walk from where I'd stopped that morning. The Fog Watch went into a frenzy. They were already coming up with theories about the origins of the thing out there. They were talking about weaknesses and strengths, ways to defend yourself, and getting equipment to capture it on film. Meanwhile, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. For all the excitement, and if you looked past the giddiness, there was really someone missing, and that person had gone missing minutes from where I'd stopped my car. Fogmen or not, that was terrifying. As July crawled into August, the foggy mornings grew more common, but less dense. You could sometimes see the fog rolling in over the clouds. I could see it just fine, and there was never any noise. Not that I didn't stop to listen, I would stop to film it every time I saw it, just in case I saw something. Sometimes I'd pull over to the side of the road with the kids still in the car, asking them to wait a minute while Mom filmed the fog. They didn't mind. They just thought it was cool. They'd stop to look as well, mistaking the occasional cow for a monster heading our way. While I never caught anything on video or felt anything similar to like I had that one morning, I could see why people got so into it. The area had a lot of open spaces, and the fog rolling in was straight out of a gothic horror novel. This white blanket swallowing up the green and turning the houses dark along the way. No wonder people looked for monsters. The countryside was practically built for hiding things in plain sight. But life rolled on, and the fog watch got distracted by the next shiny thing. Rumors about someone poisoning the neighborhood cats, and rumors about unruly teenagers busting up mailboxes. Mal's kids and my oldest got along great. They had a couple of sleepovers every now and then, staying up late and playing games. Ollie was a trooper. He loved making up things for them to do. Anything to keep them from begging for more screen time. One morning when I was going to pick up my boy, I stopped. It was just a couple of steps out the front door, but I couldn't help myself. Something made me stop, and I don't even know why. I clutched a hand over my chest and got back in the house, peering out the window. I was cold. I could see my breath on the glass. I could feel the fog rolling in. Not the usual fog, the unusual one. I called Mel. "It's right here," I said. "Look outside." "Aren't you coming to pick your boy up?" "Just look." I could hear laughter and little feet pitter-pattering in the background as she moved closer to one of the windows. I could almost guess which one, but she was just a little too far down the street for me to tell. "It's thicker," I continued, "like when I was out by the fields." "Doesn't look that bad. Just wait a minute." "All right, we'll come to you." "No." I don't know why I let that no out as hard as I did, but something inside me was screaming for me to keep my kids indoors. I could feel my heart beating through my chest. "Are you okay?" Mal asked. "You were the one who didn't like this stuff, remember?" "I know, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong, but I don't like it. Can you please just keep them inside a little longer?" We sat there, keeping the line open as we sat by the windows. Me at my place, her just down the street. The kids could feel that something in the air was different. They grew quiet, concerned. Didn't matter that we said everything was fine. They could tell it wasn't. Once the fog had engulfed our street, I couldn't even see my car on the driveway. "You can't tell me this is normal," I said. "It's less like fog and more like a cloud." "Yeah," Mal agreed. "Can't even see the chairs in the yard." "You hear anything?" I asked. "Anything at all?" "Just someone asking if he could have another ham and cheese sandwich." "You know what I mean. Out there. Anything?" There was a short pause as we both stopped to listen. I leaned my head against the window, letting my breath rest on the glass. I was shivering. Why was I shivering? We sat there for a full minute, letting the air out of the conversation. Looking out, I could imagine all kinds of things just outside of reach. Maybe something resembling a person. Maybe something else. Something being trailed by tendrils and screaming in an alien lung. Once everything else goes quiet, your mind fills in the blanks. "I think there's something there," I whispered. "I really do." Once the fog cleared, I stepped outside. I could see Mel and the kids coming down the street, but I took a moment to stop in the driveway. Looking down the road, I could see the tail end of the fog dissipating. As it did, I could have sworn I heard something. Not as much heard as felt, but there was something. My heart was pounding through my chest, and my fingers were growing numb. As I was overrun by a parade of eager children, most of my worries evaporated with immediate needs. As I ushered them inside, Mal stopped to check on me, her braid half undone and her face curled into a frown. "You sure you're okay?" Turning to face her, I considered just nodding and being done with it. But Mal was genuinely asking. This wasn't a casual, "you good?" It was an open invitation. "What if there's really something out there?" I asked. "Not a boogeyman, not a Bigfoot. What do you do?" "I understand you're worried, but..." "No, Mel, listen," I said. "Just play along. What if there's something out there? What do you do?" She looked down, tapping her foot, looking down the street, then back at me. She nodded. "First, I'd need proof," she said. "Not a group chat, Actual proof. All right, I agreed. Let's get some proof. Mal and I decided we'd take it a bit more seriously, if only to make me feel a bit better about it. She had Ollie bring home a camera from school. They had an older one they used for graduations and social media posts. I looked up a couple of tutorials on how to set up trail cameras. I wanted to see if I could get my hands on a thermal camera, but even renting those things was way out of our price range. We got some things up and running. Mal had a camera set up in her yard facing the woods. Chris managed to borrow a couple of trail cameras from some of his newfound pool buddies. It took some time to set up, but we managed to get a little makeshift surveillance system going. Next time that fog rolled in, if there was something in it, we'd catch it. I could tell Mal's heart wasn't really in it, but she was a good sport about it. She didn't complain or question it. If anything, she was concerned, but that's about as far as she'd go. It's strange how easily our roles had shifted. Now she was the grounded one, asking me to keep my head out of the clouds. Hadn't this been her thing not that long ago? Wasn't she the one who pulled me into it to begin with? For 2 full months, we got nothing. Absolutely nothing. Diddly squat. 2 months of everyday life, like nothing was happening. Like nothing was scratching at the back of my mind, demanding that I consider the worst case scenario. Like there wasn't an outline of a threat, be it man or otherwise. That's what the Fog Watch was considering. A man. Some kind of murderer or kidnapper. They'd moved away from the idea of the mysterious cryptid Fogman and moved to pointing fingers at strange loners who lived on the outskirts of town. Didn't matter that they had no motive and plenty of alibis. These people were hard-coded to grasp at straws, and their grip was like a vice. I didn't bite, and neither did Mal, and apparently neither did our cameras. Mal's kids came over for a sleepover one night. Chris was trying to one-up Ollie by putting on a Goosebumps movie night, with complete horror-themed snacks and games. I helped out here and there, but it was clear that this was his thing. He wasn't about to let some pretentious wannabe principal upstage the working man. One of Mal's kids had forgotten their glasses, so I decided to be kind enough to go get them while they settled on what episode to start with. I wrapped myself in a coat and put on my loafers, heading down the street. The further I got from my house, the more I felt something. Looking down at my fingers, I could see the fingertips turning white. I was shaking a little, my teeth clattered. By the time I got to Mal's place, my heart was already racing. I could feel it. When she finally opened the door, I rushed inside and closed the door behind me. "It's here," I said. "It's here, right now. It's here." "Slow down," she said, grasping me by the shoulders. "What are you—" She turned around, looking out into the yard. Oh. It was so sudden. The fog rolled in from nowhere. It was already covering the yard, but it was only a matter of time before it'd cover the entire street. The wind had been blowing just a moment ago, making the old branches crackle and creak. Now it was quiet. Still. "Check the camera," I said, "just in case." "Yeah," she said, nodding. "I'll do that." As she wandered off, her husband came wandering in from the other room. He gave me a casual wave and stopped to look out the window. "Scary," he admitted. "What's up?" "Glasses," I said. "Your kid, yeah, glasses." "Right," Ollie nodded. "He's still getting used to them. Want me to get them?" "Yeah, just give me a minute. I can run over with them, no problem." I shook my head, but he was already up and about. Mal came back, showing me a screen she'd set up for remote viewing. Meanwhile, Ollie was already halfway out the door. I asked him to wait, but he insisted that it wasn't a problem. Meanwhile, Mal was trying to show me the screen. There was nothing on it, but I suspect that's what she wanted me to see. Assurance. "We're good," she said, giving me a pat on the shoulder. "See? Nothing." Ollie waved at us as he held up the glasses. "Back in a jiffy." Guys, I got a feeling Ollie's not going to be back in a jiffy. I didn't know where to look, but I could tell I didn't like any of this. Part of me wanted to nod and go on with my evening, but another part of me wanted to scream and drag him back in the house. Mal's assuring hand on my shoulder made me sit down at her kitchen island for a moment as she invited me to have a drink. But the moment she got the bottle, she stopped. The corkscrew clinked against the counter as she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "What is that?" she asked. You feel that?" "Yeah," I nodded. "I do." We got up and walked up to the front door. We both looked out, watching Ollie walk down the street with a pair of children's glasses in hand. It didn't take long for the fog to completely swallow him. Seconds later, we hear it. This awful, shrill, death-shrieking scream, like something gargling a word until it becomes a noise. Mal was out the door in a flash, with me trailing behind by a breath. She didn't even bother to put shoes on. She was screaming for Ollie, flailing with her hands forward, hoping to find the white picket fence lining the front of her house. If she could grab a hold of that, she could find her way around, no matter how thick the fog was. There it was, that scream again. Closer now. A broken voice trying to recall a baby's babble. I was right behind Mal, making sure not to let her fluttering caftan out of sight. With every step into the fog, I could feel my fingers growing numb, and something in my chest aching. My lungs were growing cold, making my breath join the white of the fog. Something moved up ahead. From a distance, it looked like a person, but when you got a little closer, you could tell something was wrong. All around the edges of their silhouette, there was this bubbling, roiling motion. Bubbles growing and popping, letting out puffs of white smoke. Like the shape of a boiling man, the body making itself move while standing still. Skin hung from the sides like torn wallpaper, dangling in the open air. It wasn't just a scream, it was a death rattle. It wasn't just random noise, it was a cry. The most basic cry that I would recognize anywhere, at any time. "Mama, Mama." A pair of children's glasses clattered to the ground as the shape in front of us dissolved piece by piece. I was trying to pull Mal off the ground when I realized I wasn't breathing. I could feel my heart in my throat, but I couldn't move my hands. There were no fogmen, there was no monster. It was the fog itself, and there was something in us. Mal's hair was moving on its own, and I could see something rolling on her skin. It was happening to me too. That aching cold in my chest reached all the way to my heart, and I could feel this intense fear, like I was being stared down by a predator. Like something was hunting me, seconds away from biting down and severing my organs from one another. Something in me was tightening, getting ready to snap like a rubber band. I grabbed Mal by the arms and pulled her back, away from the street, away from whatever to wherever. I didn't care what we did or where we went. I just cared that we didn't stay put. My vision was blurry and I had trouble closing my eyes. Something on my left arm stretched the skin out, like a gas bubble. Mal had screamed out the air in her lungs. She was barely conscious. Looking around, I could only see the white of the fog. I could be 10 feet from a door or 100 feet into the middle of nowhere. I couldn't tell. I dragged her until I snagged my feet on a rock. I tipped over, collapsing to the ground with her right next to me. I couldn't get my legs to move. I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to stay right there in the middle of someone's lawn, and I was going to die from something I didn't understand. Something that was dissolving me. In that moment, as I saw smoke and bubbles rise from Mal's hair and scalp, I heard a noise escape me too. A noise that I could now understand. In that moment of fear, in that one moment where you stare mortality in the eye and it stares back, you're just begging for that one thing. You let your chattering teeth form the words for you. Mama, Mama, help. It doesn't sound like a human noise. It's the sound you make as your lungs boil and your throat closes. I remember hearing a door open, an old man yelling for someone, an old woman making a panicked phone call, something grabbing a hold of me as I'm dragged into the warmth of a home. Mal is next, but she's unconscious. I don't know if she's breathing. Someone's trying to warn us, covering us in blankets and hot water. My mouth is moving on its own, my teeth chattering. Even then, I can hear the words rolling out of me like it's the most natural thing in the world. By the time the paramedics arrive, I'm catatonic. Someone is performing chest compressions on Mal. I see her lips move, just like mine. We're saying the same thing. I fall in and out of consciousness as strange faces pass by me. Worried faces. Some apologetic and concerned, others disgusted. I'm rolled down a corridor and catch a glimpse of myself in a shiny plastic cover. My arm is a strange color. My one eye won't close. It looks dark. There's needles and bags and lights. Something stings my retina, then grows distant. "You're gonna be okay," someone says. There's a hand on my head. And for a moment, I believe them. I really do. Enough to let go and rest. The damage was mostly concentrated on my arm. They called it an extreme reaction. You know how some people can choke just from the smell of a peanut? What happened to me medically was something similar. It also burst a blood vessel in my eye, but it was nowhere near as painful as the many stitches I had to get to keep my arm from breaking apart. Mal made it through the night, but it was touch and go for a while. They had to shave her head. The worst settled in her scalp and the back of her neck. She would have to wear a neck brace to make sure the stitches didn't pop. They were in a really bad spot. She never looked the same without her braid. After the doctors ran their tests and explained what happened, they seemed just as clueless as me. Not only was this something they hadn't seen before, it was something they couldn't explain. Part of it was a kind of allergic reaction, causing a massive burst of histamines that resulted in both anaphylaxis and painful hives. But there was something else, something akin to a bacterial infection. The working theory was that a colony of bacteria was traveling through the water droplets on the fog, causing massive allergic reactions in those sensitive to it. But that didn't explain what we'd seen. Allergies don't dissolve someone into thin air, and no matter the explanation, no one can tell what really happened to Ollie. He was deemed a missing person, not dead or dissolved, missing. There was no world where they would accept someone disappearing into nothing. Chris and I moved north as soon as I got out of the hospital. Mal moved west to be with her family. She couldn't afford to be a stay-at-home mom anymore, and it could take a long time before Ollie was presumed dead. There'd be no insurance payout till long after the damage was already done. We kept in touch for a while, but I couldn't bear to look at the fog watch anymore. I kept getting panic attacks whenever there was a notification, and Chris made the executive decision to pull me from social media altogether. Honestly, it was the right call. It's been some time now since that night when Ollie disappeared, and I don't know what frightens me more, that there are forces at work that can turn a person into nothing, or how stupid I was to be fascinated by it to begin with. There's a reason we stay inside when the wind blows and the rain comes down. Even animals take shelter, so why are we the only ones to go looking in places we shouldn't? But I think what frightens me most is that gnawing feeling that remains, that at the end of my line, when that certain darkness comes to collect its toll, I know what I'll say. I've said it before. It may have been the first thing I said, and it may be my last. What's more natural than asking for help? Mama, help. Please, Mama.
Saturday once again, serving up a banger. Like, I don't know, what are you guys thinking? I'm thinking like maybe there's like acid in the fog. Well, no, they would have been able to tell at the hospital. I don't know. Maybe, you know what? We need to just ask Saturday. Like, or unless you guys know, maybe it's some kind of curse. This could be curse. It's kind of cursy. It's from r/scary stories from user patientbag558. I pick locks for a living. These are some of my most unusual calls. I've been a locksmith for a little over a decade now. Working this profession, you get to see a different side of people. Their most embarrassing moments, their worst days, the things they cherish deeply. There's plenty of stories to tell, as my husband well knows. He told me I should share some of them with you. You can tell a lot about people from the locks they choose to put on their doors. Some indicate ignorance, some belong to those interested in tight security, some tell you about where a person came from, and some locks are just plain weird. There was this one case where I got called out to a family of 3 who had locked themselves out of their own house. According to the mother, they had left their keys in a coat pocket. It was warm weather that day, unusually so for January, so they had gone outside without it and forgotten them. This is the single most common thing I get called out for, plain negligence. I sighed, looking over at their 7-year-old boy who was trying to lure a cat from under a car to pet it. After confirming ownership of the property, I set my toolbox down and took a look at the lock. I paused for a moment before smiling. It was a Wellington 5-lever, old brass, a little oxidized. Now, I live and work in Philadelphia, and I've never seen one of these things in real life before. Broadly speaking, lever locks are more of an old continent thing. They mostly see use in the UK, and even among them, this looked like a more obscure model. I pointed at it and asked the mother about it cheerfully. She just shook her head. I don't know, miss. It was there when we bought the house. My smile faded slightly. I asked her if she had replaced or rekeyed the locks since moving in. She shook her head again. I cleared my throat and gave her the friendly but firm advice to change them. I can recommend this to everyone. Previous owners don't always have the best security practices regarding their keys. After the short lecture, I inserted the turning tool and tried the levers until I heard the mechanism turn. I pushed the handle down. The door swung inward and a small gust of air blew out. The thing that surprised me was the smell. Spicy, sickly sweet. A hint of fermentation. I recognized it. The smell of something dead. I looked down the hall. The interior was a bit dated. I turned my head towards the family. They were overjoyed, shaking my hand and thanking me profusely. The little boy pushed past me and ran inside. I watched him disappear around a corner, and I couldn't help but feel something was wrong. I told them I had to use the bathroom, asked if I could use theirs. They agreed, and I entered. The house had an unusual layout. There was a spiral staircase in the middle of the open living room that led up to the loft. The living room was messy. There was a trash bag in the corner, and child's toys everywhere. It looked like it hadn't been vacuumed in a while. The smell was coming from upstairs. I ascended the stairs and continued toward the source. It was coming from a closet at the back of the hall that connected the living room to the second-floor bedrooms. I walked down the hall and put my hand on the knob. I waited for a moment, then turned. On the floor was a cat. It had been dead for a while. Maggots nibbled at its partially desiccated body. The smell hit me like a truck, overwhelming. I stared at it for a moment longer than I needed to. A small thing, trapped in a dark place it couldn't get out of. No one had heard it, no one had come looking. I hurried back downstairs. The parents had settled into the living room, looking up at me as I came down the staircase. I panted for a moment and told them their cat was dead. They stared at me. We don't own a cat, the mother asserted. I wasn't sure if I should laugh. I opened my mouth, closed it. In the end, I just led them up the stairs, flinging open the closet in front of their eyes. They didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there. The mother looked away, clearly disturbed. Then the arguing started. They assured me, no, insisted that they never had a cat. Not only that, they said they had never seen this one before. Not in the neighborhood, never. In this line of work, you get a sense for when people are bullshitting you. I could tell this wasn't that. This was something else. I believed them. I stared at it for a moment longer than I needed to. It's a bad way to go, getting trapped somewhere with no way out. Sometimes there's nobody to open the door. I wonder what that must feel like. To this day, I don't know how the poor thing made it into that house, up the stairs and into a closet without the residents ever noticing. Nor do I know who closed the door behind it. For their sake, I hope they replace their locks. Yeah, guys, that's suspicious. Like, there's no way they wouldn't hear a cat clawing, trying to get out of this closet, and then the smell of it, like, yuck. Anyways, let's continue. I've learned a rule of thumb working this job. The stronger the lock, the stranger the case. The previous story was a good example of that. Lever locks are secure by their obscurity. Unfortunately, I've encountered that specific lock twice since, both under worse circumstances. I don't want to write about those cases. Instead, I want to write about an experience that still gives me a watched feeling from time to time when I'm alone at night. It was 3 a.m. I got called out of bed by a client claiming to have been locked out of their house. Same as usual. I grumbled and got out of bed, cursing our 24-hour policy and driving over to the address provided to me. It was way out there, near the edge of the Wharton State Forest, along a redacted road. I eventually passed the entry sign. Took me nearly an hour to get there. I almost thought I had the wrong address. A little past 4 in the morning, I found it, an old townhouse.
3 units side by side, just off a dead-end road that trailed into the woods. Dutch-looking architecture, or close enough to it, like something pulled from an old-fashioned town center, except this was in the middle of the forest. For reference, every house I passed up until this point was a standard single-story suburban unit. I stopped my car and got out. It was cold. I rubbed my hands together and zipped up my coat. The only sound was the wind. No insects, no animals, just the occasional rustling of the trees overhead. I felt uneasy from the moment I got out of the car. I turned on my flashlight and pointed the beam towards the house, nearly jumping when I saw the person standing in front. It was the young man who had called. He was about my height, a bit chubby with brown glasses. He stood at the bottom step to one of the units. I wonder how long he had been standing there in the dark. I approached and greeted him, coming up the steps and staring at the townhouses all the while. He smiled and thanked me for coming. I pointed at the houses and asked how we'd ended up here, living in the middle of the woods. He shrugged and said the rent was cheap, that the forest and hiking trails were a nice bonus. I asked him what the story behind this bizarre building was. He just shrugged and said he didn't know either. Side note, guys, I know there's probably not a skinwalker in this story, but this sounds like skinwalker territory. Anyways, let's continue. I was getting increasingly suspicious the more he talked. He seemed oddly distant. I got the distinct impression he was hiding something. The state of the townhouses didn't help the matter. They looked abandoned. My initial assumption was he was looking to squat there, but now I'm not so sure. I asked him for proof of ownership. He shook his head and with a solemn face told me everything was inside. He said it like that, emphasis on everything. I narrowed my gaze and looked at the door. The lock was a Medico high-security tumbler mechanism. I recognized it immediately. It's the kind that jumps out to you in this field. It told me whoever put it there really cared about security and was willing to pay hand over fist for it. I looked back at the young man, who was staring up at the building with a warm expression, as if it were a beautiful sunset. I followed standard protocol, asked him if, in lieu of documentation, he could describe the interior. He looked back at me, smiled, and nodded. So there's an entryway that leads into the living room. I nodded, grabbing my notepad and starting to write. It's more deep than wide. There's a kitchen in the back and a rear view window. The second floor has a bedroom. I stopped writing. He was describing every townhouse ever. This gave me nothing other than vindication of the bad gut feeling I'd been getting. No, sir, I need details. Can you be specific? He stopped for a moment. His face got very serious. I half expected him to get upset with me. A liar caught in the act. Instead, like a switch turning, he went back to his warm smile and looked back at the house. Of course, my mistake. Quite all right, I said, grasping my pen a little tighter. Let's try again. He tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to remember something he knew perfectly well. The entryway has hardwood floors. There's a scratch near the front door, a long one, like something heavy was dragged across it. The walls are painted in off-white, not quite cream. Someone painted over the original color and didn't do a great job of it. You can still see the old color near the baseboards if you look closely. I wrote it down. My hand had slowed. The living room has a couch against the left wall, dark green. One of the cushions doesn't sit right. The stuffing's gone flat on the right side. He paused. There's a bookshelf, more decorative than functional. A few paperback sci-fi novels, some picture frames, one of them is face down. I stopped writing. He said all of this the way you'd describe a painting you'd spent a long time standing in front of. Fond, unhurried. I stayed absolutely still, hanging on to every word. There's an alien poster in the master bedroom, an assorted calligraphy set, an unfinished drawing of a park with a cartoon emu in the middle. That's about it. My breathing grew shallow. I just kind of stood there, looking at him. He had described my house, my bedroom, my drawing, the face-down picture. Every single detail was perfect. I nearly dropped my pen. He still had that distant, fond look on his face. He looked as if he had described his childhood home. My jaw clenched. I excused myself for a moment, went around the corner, and quickly dialed my colleague's number. I wasn't sure what to say to him. I just told him something was wrong with the client and to come quickly. He said he understood, promised me he'd be there soon. I put my phone down, texted him the address, and turned the corner. The client wasn't there anymore. I looked around. Just empty forest, gravel road, and the building beside me. Called his name, nothing. I spent a few minutes shining my flashlight around, hoping to catch another glimpse of him. I didn't see a sign of him. No vehicle either. Eventually, I gave up and just sat in my own car waiting for Paul. 30 minutes later, I saw the headlights of his car coming down the road. He got out. I told Paul what happened. He was as unnerved by the sight of the random townhouses as I was. Still, we were curious. After some deliberation, we agreed to unlock it. It would be an actual challenge for once, considering the lock in question. Those high security things take a while. You sorta have to rotate the pins in a way that's really hard to do, even with our specialized equipment. The first light of dawn was turning the sky a deep purple by the time we got it open. I gave Paul a high five and we turned the handle, entering inside. It was empty. I don't mean it was unremarkable, I mean it was completely empty. No furniture, no wallpaper, no upper floors or any staircases leading up there. Just empty space starting from the foundation and going up to the roof 3 stories up. Like someone built the exterior as a facade to hide something. Except there was nothing to hide. Just a void where an interior should have been. The longer I stood inside, the more I got the feeling I wasn't supposed to be there. The kind of feeling you'd get if you were trespassing on a government property. The kind of feeling that screams you're not alone. Paul and I didn't say anything. We just looked at each other, backed out, got into our cars, and drove home. I spent the rest of the night with the locks of my own house. I rekeyed everything in silence. I tested the old keys to make sure they didn't work anymore, glancing over at the scratch near the entryway and latching the deadbolt as I did. People are a lot like locks. Everyone has their own mechanism of action, a hidden key. If you know how to unlock them, you've effectively solved how to deal with them. Everyone has desires, fears, secrets they would never tell anyone. Figure out how they tick, and you can be their best friend, their strongest business partner, or their worst enemy. I was supervising Paul as he tried to sell a pair of locks to a 50-something-year-old gentleman. The customer was continuously convinced Paul was trying to upsell him. "I just want a lock, damn it," he insisted. Paul, oblivious, kept trying to explain the pros and cons of each one. Each time he did, the man got more agitated. I stifled a laugh. Eventually, I put an arm on Paul's shoulder, took him in the back, and told him to pick out the cheapest, shittiest lock he could find. He did, and the 2 of us returned and presented it to him. "About damn time," the man said, tossing a wad of $1 bills on the counter. "Have a good day, sir." He mumbled something and left in a huff. The moment the door closed behind him, I began laughing. Paul quickly joined in. A credit card or a firm yank would get past that thing. Our shared amusement was interrupted by the phone. I picked up. A woman answered. She said she had been locked out of her home and needed help getting back in. Her voice sounded stiff, controlled. I told her I'd be right there. I turned to Paul, asking him not to burn the place down. He helpfully replied he would not try to rub 2 keys together like fire starters. I grinned. When I arrived, I was surprised to see a man in his mid-30s sitting out on the steps, smoking a cigarette thoughtfully. He had black hair, a bit of stubble, and the expression of someone too tired to do anything but sit there. I double-checked the address. This was it. I walked up slowly and greeted him. He seemed distant, taking another puff before answering. I asked him if he needed help getting the lock open. "I guess." Strange. Not often I get called over to help someone get in and arrive to find a completely different person outside. I asked him for proof of ownership and he didn't hesitate. He unlocked his phone and showed me the lease. 2 people. His name was Thomas, the other was Sarah. I presumed she was the one who called. I asked him if Sarah was home. He shrugged. I walked up and rang the doorbell. Waited a minute. No response. I looked back at the man. He had put out his cigarette and was just staring off into space now. I paused for a moment too. The sight felt so surreal. I looked back at the door, took a better look at the lock. It was worn.
The wood around it was scraped and damaged. It looked like it had been replaced, poorly, and more than once. I sat down next to him. How long have you lived here, Thomas? His eyes darted to one side for a moment. 7 years? I asked. He turned his head to look at me, tilted it a little. Months. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wind. After what felt like a century, Thomas asked me a question. You ever been in love? I thought for a moment. You could say that. Thomas looked forward down the steps. With a man? A woman? I turned my head slightly. I don't judge, Thomas shrugged. With a lock, I answered. Thomas smirked a little. Have you ever heard of the multi-lock MT5 Plus? The keys are three-dimensional. They unlock 2 sets of pins at once, one at the bottom, one at the side. Thomas nodded along slowly. It's the most complicated lock I've ever worked with. Picking it feels beyond me. When you look at a mechanism like that for long enough, you start to appreciate the exterior qualities of it, the smoothness of its design, the little quirks, the way the Mortise locks perfectly into the wood of the door. Thomas paused for a moment, beginning to understand. Does the lock love you back? I leaned back slightly. I think so. It's hard to tell. I can only look through the keyhole. The two of us sat in silence for another minute or so. A child blew past us on a bicycle. One of the neighbors put the trash out. A crow flew overhead. She gets this dimple, Thomas started, touching his right cheek, on the side of her face when she smiles. I turned to him. He was staring into the distance again, an expression as if he were witnessing a slow-motion tragedy, far away, and was powerless to stop it. He asked, almost inaudibly, I wonder what happened to it. I stayed silent. She does this thing when she finds something funny. She starts snickering before she even gets to the punchline. He almost smiled. Can't help herself. Thomas sighed. She's the smartest person I've ever met. Not book smart necessarily, just walks into a room and reads it in 10 seconds flat. He paused. I've never been able to do that. I say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I don't always know when to push and when to leave well enough alone. He picked at a thread on his sleeve. I guess I knew it was going to be like this from the first, Thomas muttered. Thought it was just the stress of moving. Thought we'd get over it. Deep down, I knew better. He was starting to choke up. Several seconds passed before he continued. Every time she avoided me, it felt like I'd broken something. I never knew what it was until it was too late. I'm starting to think it's me. I'm the mistake. God. Thomas began to sob into his hands in a way that almost sounded like a laugh. I reached out a hand toward his shoulder, but stopped before touching him. I pulled back. I sat there watching the sunset for a long while as Thomas's sobs grew quieter. Eventually, the weeping turned to sighs, and the sighs to silence. I sat there for a little while still. The clouds were painted in orange and pink hues, contrasting against the sky's deep indigo. I wish I didn't have to love, Thomas whispered. I looked down and pursed my lips. My toolbox sat motionless on the steps. I grabbed it and began unlocking the door. Thomas sat by quietly. After a minute or so, I was done. I swung the door open, which turned directly into the living room. Sarah sat at the table, looking at me. Her eyes were red. I understood then. She could have opened it, physically speaking. Instead, she called me. I didn't stay long. I got my payment and went home, glancing over my shoulder as the door closed behind Thomas. I drove home, staring out at the road. 30 minutes felt like hours. When I finally parked, I sat in the car for a moment, watching the porch light. Barbara had left one on for me. She always did. I entered without a sound, throwing my coat over the rack carelessly. The apartment was dark. The last train had already passed. The walls blocked out the traffic, leaving the interior in silence. On the couch was a figure. He sat perfectly still in the darkness, the only light from the window. It stopped just short of his face. I closed the door behind me and sat down next to him. Then I lowered my head onto his lap. He didn't react. How was your day? I asked. He didn't respond. I nodded. Are you hungry, Amirik? I was thinking I could get us takeout, Thai maybe, or I could make something. He didn't respond. Tie it is. I turned onto my side. The vase of roses on the coffee table. Barbara, she'd been the best caretaker I'd ever met. I stared at the petals for a while, then reached out and touched one. It was starting to brown at the edge. I turned back, lying on my spine, looking at the ceiling. I had an interesting case today, I said. You'd like this one. I shifted, getting comfortable. Family of 3, locked out of their house. The kid was trying to lure a cat out from under a car. The lock was a Wellington 5-lever. Old brass. I'd never seen one before. I waited. Sometimes he made a sound, a tiny exhale that might have been a laugh. Not tonight. You're so quiet. You had so much more to say yesterday. He didn't respond. I sat up slowly. On the nightstand beside the couch, he slept here now, it was easier than the bedroom, there was a glass of water. The surface was perfectly still. I stared at it, willing a ripple. Nothing. You'd talk to a deadbolt before you'd talk to me. He'd said that 7 years ago, standing in the doorway with a suitcase, the argument still hot in the air. He'd been right. I'd spent so many nights in the workshop, picking a Medico just to feel something click into place, while he sat alone in the dark. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. Didn't drink it, just held it. When I came back, I sat on the floor in front of him, my back against the couch, my head just below his hand. His fingers were warm. They didn't move. I'm sorry, I whispered. The words hung there, too small, too late, said too many times. I looked over at the face-down picture of the two of us. I wondered if the townhouse client had known about Amirik's condition too. I got up, locked the front door, and came back to the couch. The room was quiet. Outside, a car passed. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the water glass on the nightstand was casting a small reflection on the wall. The street light bent through the glass. It trembled slightly, maybe from a passing truck, maybe not. I watched it until it stilled. I lay down beside him, my hand on his chest, feeling the slow rise and fall of a man trapped in his own body. Between us sat the only lock I had ever been able to open. Tie tomorrow, I whispered. Tonight, I'll just stay here. Wow. Those were some wild stories from this locksmith. It was really cool how the author could portray that the OP views locks like they're metaphors for people, and they leave them for us to interpret, which I like open-ended stories like that. Wow, I cannot believe you made it all the way to the end of the video. Good for you. If you made it to this point, comment Fortnite Battle Pass. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like videos like this, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Go check out my main channel, Droven without the 2, as I upload on there every other day that I'm not uploading on this channel. Whew, that was a lot. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.